Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm bringing you greetings from here in Cambridge. Very sunny today in Cambridge, actually. Reminds me of perhaps being in Nigeria. I am using a physical microphone as well today just because I've been told some people cannot hear me. So before I actually go any further, I don't know if you can maybe just put something on the chat just that I know that you can actually hear me clearly. I'm not very sure. I've had a text message saying we cannot hear. So if you can just perhaps put a message on the chat box so I know that you can hear me. Or perhaps maybe if there's a way you can raise your hand, I'm not sure. Okay, yes, you can. Thank you very much. I've seen one confirmation. Thank you very much. I'll start all over again just because now that I know you can hear me. So thank you very much for joining us in this education disruption seminar. Today's sort of titled Student Recruitment and Student Retention. And the purpose for bringing this and the objective, I will explain very shortly. But for those people who are new to the CIEC conference, CIEC conference really represents the Cambridge International Education Conference, which actually started in 2011. But by that time, we took over what was the longest running summer program in Cambridge called the EDA program. I can see a delegate who was part of the EDA program many years ago on this call as well, just from the name. So that's the origin of this particular sort of conference, and now this seminar we're hosting. The motivation for this particular disruption seminar is because we've worked with many schools, particularly across Africa, since 2011, and we feel strongly that now than ever before is a good time to even be closer to schools, as schools are going through rather interesting seasons, not just in Nigeria, but across the globe as well. So the disruption seminars have been set up as an encouragement, as well as through our conversations, through sharing, to offer hope to schools, to show schools that there's a way forward, and to also show schools what other schools are doing in other areas as well. So not just in Nigeria and across Africa, across Europe, in China, and bringing those experiences to bear. Because we believe very strongly that it's only by sharing that we all become better at it. We've been using the words collaboration, we've been using the words communication more than ever before. So this particular seminar is really focusing on the business of student recruitment and retention. Of course, the lifeline, the life wire of any education establishment, be it in Europe, be it in Africa, is the students. The students, getting them in is critical to our success as institutions. Except, of course, you're a government-funded institution where you get funding from the government, and it doesn't really matter. The students will come anyway. In that case, it's less of an issue. But in cases where you have to go after the students, then it's important that we figure out how to best go about it. So this is what this seminar is really all about. There are three parts to today's session. The first part is that I will be sharing on some of the work we've been doing here in Cambridge, working with schools in Africa in particular, and some opportunity areas we foresee, particularly in this period. And following that, we'll have Dr. Akanimo Odon, who will be speaking particularly on partnerships and opportunities as well that schools in Nigeria and the rest of Africa can benefit from. And then we have Tosin Adebisi from Sussex University joining us, looking particularly at the retention side of things, some of the ideas, some of the solutions that he's also observed, not just working in the UK, but having traveled to most parts of Africa as well. We'll be sharing some of his ideas and concepts as well. So that really is what today would be all about. There'll be a lot of practical things that we'll be sharing. There would always be an opportunity as well for you to also ask questions. There'll be opportunities for you to also, perhaps if there are things that deals with your particular school situation as well, then do let us know about that. We'll be very happy to tackle that. I'll start by also just, before I go into my presentation, and I must warn you that once I get into my presentation, I'm perhaps going to shut down my video and you just see a still image of myself, partly because I'm going to be controlling the screen from here as well. But secondly, because as you're probably aware, most barbing salons are not open till next week. So I'm not quite sure I want to keep showing my afro for everybody to see. So there will be a still image of me that you'll see going forward, but then I'll come back again at the end of the session. But before I go into my sort of presentation, I strongly believe that schools must be radical in their thinking now than ever before. You know, a couple of years ago, when you speak to schools about how do you foresee teaching online, using the internet, being, leveraging technology, many would say, well, we're not there yet. We don't see that happening. But we've had to all adjust to that all of a sudden. The same thing happens when it comes to recruitment, that some of the ideas that we're going to be showcasing and talking to you about today are things that have been tried and tested. They're things that for some years now, for those who've been coming for the Cambridge conference, there are things we've been putting out there to schools to really consider. So they're not exactly new ideas, but we're reinforcing them because sometimes it's in the mundane, simple things that comes the solutions we're looking for. Some of it will sound very innovative, but I assure you that they've all been tried and tested. Schools have some questions in mind right now. How do I get in new students in this season? How do I retain my existing students? The questions on online marketing. Now that the traditional methods of marketing and recruitment have been proven not to be as effective, how do I engage with online marketing? What about my relationship management? How am I sustaining relationships to help with my retention? Some schools that run open days are asking questions. What about virtual open days? How do we consider still promoting ourselves despite the limitations in movement? There are questions on conversion. How do I convert all these applicants who have made inquiries and so far haven't moved forward? How do we get that converted? Very important questions. And the final question some schools have is engaging your teachers in this season. How do we engage our teachers as part of the recruitment process, particularly for schools that have teachers teaching on WhatsApp, teaching on Zoom? How can those teachers be conduits, effective outlets to reaching out to parents and students? So these are some of the questions that we would also consider as the day goes on. But I want to start first by sharing some thoughts on an area of opportunity that I believe schools should really look into. And hopefully at the end of that presentation slide, I'll take some questions and I'll be glad to hear from you. So I'll start first speaking about this area that I've been working on for the last 2 years. And it's an area that I can foresee it becoming a growth area for schools. So I'll just put on my shared screen now and start that. Let's get that rolling. Right. So one of the areas that I've been working on with our team here in Cambridge for the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, is the whole aspect of diaspora recruitment. By diaspora recruitment, I'm talking about Africans, Nigerians in the diaspora who are looking for opportunities in Africa, in Nigeria. For those schools that were part of the session the last time, on the Saturday, we had someone joining us all the way from South Africa who's been teaching students in the UK all the way from South Africa. So this aspect of diaspora recruitment is what I'll be speaking on firstly this morning. I can see we have Helen as well joining us. Thank you very much for coming online. But let's tackle the issue firstly of why may parents be thinking about your schools in Nigeria right now? Why would parents be thinking about Africa as an option right now? One school asked me that question after the session 2 weeks ago, that, really are parents thinking about Africa right now? And I said the answer is yes, parents are thinking about Africa right now. And the reason parents are thinking about Africa right now are as follows. Number one, whether we like it or not, the death rate in Africa from COVID-19 is still rather small when you compare it to countries like the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and places like that. So parents have a safety concern. Their thinking is that actually that is still a safe place to get our children to. And these conversations are ongoing as we speak. Parents still believe that the numbers are such that Africa certainly looks attractive as a destination. And I'll come back to that. The second reason why parents are looking at Africa at the moment is to do with culture. Parents are still thinking along the lines of having my child study on the African continent means that they can be exposed to culture that their parents really embrace. Last year in November 2019, we had a number of schools from Nigeria in particular come to London to speak to parents about what they have to offer. And we saw good interest from parents who are thinking exactly along these lines. How do we maintain and retain our culture to our children? So that's the second reason. The first reason was COVID-19. The second reason is culture. The third reason parents are looking at Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya at this time is also linked to the first one of security. But this time around, it's actually real security and safety for their children. There are parents particularly, and this is not the whole of the United Kingdom, for example, but there are parents, for example, in London who are particularly worried about their boys, worried about issues such as gangs, worried about issues such as drugs. And I'm not saying that those things don't exist back home, but in most cases, they're in safe environments, in boarding schools, and you don't have the same challenges. So the issue of safety, many parents start to worry about that when the children get to secondary education. They start to think about their boys in inner cities. How do we get them to a safe environment where they can, for the next 3 to 4 years, straighten themselves and will return them home? I speak as a parent as well who is actually reflected on the same sort of decisions as well. So I'm speaking from experience and talking to other parents here in the diaspora that is something they're always thinking about, safety and getting the children back home. Another factor parents think about to inform their decision on whether or not we would send our children back home is networking. It sounds so small, but it's very important. Many of these children are growing up in a global community where they are from Nigeria, from Uganda, from wherever in Africa, but their parents have connections on both sides, but the children know very little about the other side. And parents believe that the children who would run the countries in the future are still perhaps back in their home country. And how can their own children connect with those children? So it's good for business networking, it's good for political networking, and is good in terms of doing future business. And I'm sure schools may not always see that as a reason, but once again, parents have very interesting reasons of sending their children back home to a place like Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Kenya, or what have you. The final one, of course, is to do with religion. Most Africans, as you know, are hugely religious, and parents come up with the same thing. I'm a Muslim. I want my child to connect with their real faith in Africa. I'm a Christian. I want my child to connect with their real faith in Africa. I'm worried about some of the things I see here socially. I'm worried about issues with morals, with what we may call character, although I think character might depend on how you define it. But in Africa, people talk about morals and character, and I guess what they're talking about might be, I want my child to behave in a particular way, respectful to adults, do things in a particular way, which, might be culturally sensitive, but they don't see that here. Because very often what you have in the diaspora are parents who grew up in Africa and came to work abroad for economic reasons. So they've come here at a very old age, in some cases, as already as adults, and they want their children to have that same experience they have. And this is where I believe your schools have a role to play. This is where I believe that our schools, I'm just moving into the next slide. Oops. Okay. Right. So the initiative Education Africa and the Diaspora Recruitment is really looking at a couple of objectives. Number one is promoting study options within Africa. So that's what I just explained right now, having students return to Africa to study. The second one is promoting cultural exchanges. One market is a market for students who want to return. The second market is a market for schools in the US, in Canada, in the UK, who may want to send students to your school for a term, 2 terms, for example, with their teachers. And what I hear all the time, and I hear this all the time from schools, particularly in Nigeria, maybe less in Ghana, less in Kenya, is why would they come to us? And I ask, why not? Well, we're not this, we're not that, we don't have this. And I'm saying, well, some of these schools send students to Malawi. I've never been to Malawi, but from what I understand, there's just one straight road from the airport to the city, and that's it, I'm back. So, they're going there every year for exchange programs, but many of your schools are quite impressive. You've got good boarding houses. Some of your boarding houses have air conditioning, which, my goodness, that's really impressive. But, these students want to have an African cultural experience, which your schools have to offer. So there are schools genuinely looking for cultural exchanges for students and for teachers. The third thing I've said here is that there is an opportunity now than ever before for Africa to be a receiving destination for international students from Africa, but also from outside Africa. And I'm going to throw some more light on that. In 2012, 2013, or maybe before that, I started doing some work in the country of Angola. Angola is very close to South Africa in the SADC region, as we call it. And I was quite surprised that schools in Angola were a lot behind compared to where schools are in places like Nigeria or Ghana, for example. And I used to ask myself, why are schools in places like Ghana or Nigeria not going to Angola to offer services to families? I know Nigerian families in Angola, for example, who actually send their kids to Nigeria for education. But not many schools are approaching those families, for example. Not many schools are talking to other international schools in Africa to let them know that we run IGCSEs, we run A-levels, we run international foundation program, because I think very often, and I think this is what this session is really all about, that very often our focus may have been too narrow. Very often we may have just focused on Nigeria, on Ghana. Very often we may not have been thinking outside the box enough. And I think this is something that we must change now than ever before, because you can be a school in Nigeria offering online tutorial programs to students in Angola, for example. A lot of Angolan students want to come to a place like the UK, but it's expensive. And what they're coming for is to learn English. There are schools in Nigeria already, in Ghana, in Kenya, with outstanding IGCSE English results already. You're much cheaper than schools in the UK. And you have what I call a similar cultural experience to Angola. So why are your schools not reaching out to those families? So that's something for us to also think about. So as an organization, this is some of the areas we've been working with schools in Nigeria and the rest of Africa on already. So there's the Diaspora Recruitment Service, where we talk to families in the UK, the US, on your behalf. There are student recruitment channels within Africa. So for example, on tomorrow's webinar, there will be schools from Botswana, Namibia, Kenya, for example. I think it's high time we started having conversation amongst ourselves as how can we work together? Because some of those schools in Kenya have told me that they want to send children to Nigeria for a term or Ghana for a term. So we need to start thinking about those opportunities at the present time. Student exchange courses linking students in the UK and the US with schools in Africa is an aspect that we're also looking at. And then I'll talk about the last two options: providing examination testing centers for entrance examinations. We realized last year when a number of schools in Nigeria came to the UK to talk to parents, that there were still schools asking parents to fly home and take entrance exams and, you know, all those interesting things. You need to come and sit our exams in country. Of course, they cannot do that at the moment because there are no flights till maybe July or August. But your schools must make coming to you very easy at the moment. I think schools must rethink what I may call the barriers to dealing with you. So how easy is it for parents to transact with you right now? So one of the services we provide for schools in Nigeria, across Africa, is the ability for students to take your entrance exams through our offices in the UK, for example, and through partner organizations in the US and Canada. Because for families who want to come to your schools, yes, you want to test them, but I think rather than having them fly all over the world just to come to you, it might make more sense to make it much easier for them. We have an opportunity as well for your promotional materials, your school prospectuses to be showcased in our offices in those locations. So I really think that reaching out to students in the diaspora now than ever before is a great way to increase your student numbers. And I think when we had the session the last session we had about two weeks ago, we mentioned that a lot of schools call themselves international schools. And when you ask them, why are you an international school? The question is always, we have an international curriculum. We teach the Cambridge IGCSEs, and that tends to be the story. And that's a good story, but I really believe that you can truly be an international school when you have the diversity of students. That's when you start to look international, when you have students online in Angola taking your programs, or you have physically students coming from those countries into your program as well. That's when you have the diversity to really call yourself an international school. as such. I'm not saying there's something wrong in the examination being an international school, but I really think we need to think a little bit outside the box on how it can be international. So, diaspora families may not have the same challenges you have with local families in terms of their earning power, for example. So you know, I think one of the biggest worries or concerns of schools right now is that parents losing jobs and all those, and I'm not saying that's the same in all cases. So schools are getting worried that, well, parents are losing corporate jobs or whatever, so we're worried. The question therefore becomes, are you looking at all the other sources of students? In business, you're told multiple streams of income. In education, I think we need to also think about multiple streams of students. Are there other ways we can get students? Are there opportunities to have students taking some of our courses online, for example? So I'll give you another example. And this is an example that I'm also very familiar with in the UK. A parent would say, well, I don't want my child to return to Ghana, Nigeria, for example, but are there schools in those countries that can run an online African language, like, I'm not sure what the language is in Ghana. Helen, you may need to help me with that.
You got Tree or you got Ewe, Tante.
Good. So a parent may want their child to learn that in Cambridge or in London, or somebody wants to learn Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, for example. Why are schools not offering those courses online? Now you're all on Zoom. Why can't your school offer those programs? And parents can pay you for those courses at the present time. Because children are at home. I think we've been saying this for a while now, that children are at home, and it therefore means that parents are looking for ways to engage them, for example. So rather than in your school maybe trying to run what everybody else is doing, you may want to find something that nobody else is offering at the moment. And you know, your own country's language, I don't think anybody can compete with you on that right now. To have teachers in your country running those programs as we speak. So that's an example of a creative solution on how schools might start to think about leveraging on this opportunity we find ourselves. Because technology has, whether we like it or not, has radically shifted the goalpost. You can get a lot more done. Your students don't all have to be physically on campus. Your students can also be online in different areas as well. So you can improve your international diversity, you can improve your income. You can also save parents the cost of traveling to take entrance exams. Some of the things that we also offer to schools here in the UK is that there are big diaspora events. For example, the Redeemed Christian Church of God runs an event in London twice a year. It's the largest gathering of Nigerians in the UK, for example, and you normally will have about 50,000 families at that event regularly. It's an opportunity as well for you to get information about your school out to the families at those programs. KICC run a similar event as well. The Nigerian High Commission in London run quite similar events as well, where you know, schools can take advantage of those platforms to reach out to parents in the diaspora at this point. Parents in the diaspora think and still maintain the position that Africa is a safer place to be right now to educate their children. And I think that between now and September, one of the action points I want us to take away from the sessions today is that every school here, I mean every school that is really serious about international recruitment, needs to create a page on their website or Facebook page that says international admissions. Because you need to start thinking along those lines, because you must have information for parents coming outside the diaspora, how you can engage with them. Our commitment to you is that we will, through the networks we have, get the information out there to the families. Some of you may not know this, that on Ben Television, that's Ben TV, we have a bi-weekly event where we actually showcase schools in Nigeria. So I'm happy to send you the link. And through this medium, you are actually speaking to parents in the diaspora across Europe who are seriously looking about sending their children back home to Africa, to Nigeria. And this can really help your school's bottom line. I think from the results I've seen across places like Nigeria, the results are strong enough. I think sometimes we may not really have the confidence in what we are offering, but I think it's also time that we also start to take those steps. Let's put information out on our website that we have international admissions. Let's let parents know, for example, that they can take entrance exams, which we'll be happy to talk to you about that. They can take entrance exams in the diaspora through us, for example. Let's allow parents in the diaspora to know that our schools are open for online tutoring in Nigerian languages, for example. Our schools are open for online tutoring in civic education, history, for example. In the UK, in the US, at the moment, you have this movement called Black Lives Matters. And a lot of that is because a lot of our children don't know their history very well. So your schools can help with that as well. So I think all I'm trying to get you to start thinking about this morning in this session is that now than ever before, our schools must start to think about the diaspora. There are parents who, in the diaspora right now, who send their children to private schools in England, in America, in Canada, but because they may have lost their jobs here in the UK, they cannot afford to keep those children in private schools in these countries, but they can afford private education back in places like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, as an example. So how are our schools positioning themselves for that opportunity is what the diaspora recruitment is really all about, that in a time when we have to diversify the sources of our income, let's think about this aspect. The summer holidays are coming. I'm looking forward to schools on this platform running virtual summer schools. And once again, this is something that, we're just not here to talk about it. We're here to help you achieve that as well. Virtual summer schools. Get your teachers online. Pick specific subjects you're good at. Provide the technology for your teachers. We will announce it to parents in London, in the US, in Canada, for example. So please, let's start to think about how we can leverage on the opportunity COVID-19 has created for us. Let's start to think about leveraging the opportunity that the diaspora presents right now. We mustn't waste this crisis. Parents see us as the safest country, one of the safest countries right now. I know the press in Nigeria, in Ghana would worry about, the death rate is rising. But I asked myself a question a couple of days ago. I think I was speaking to Helen about 2-3 days ago, and she told me the death rate in Ghana. I said, well, that is like a quarter or half of the UK's death rate on a daily basis, and life is becoming normal all of a sudden. So if you don't have that challenge, I think you should be saying to parents right now, we are the place for you to come to, and we're a safe destination. We have excellent boarding facilities. And if you're not ready to come to us right now, we have an online opportunity to help you engage your children whilst they're home. I think my final thought, and then I'll be open to some questions, is that because it looks like class sizes in places like the UK and the US would need to be halved. So when you have like 30 in a class, they might become 15 or 20 in some cases. So there are still issues on numbers. So parents are also worried that they don't want their children to go back to cramped classrooms as well. So I think schools in our countries mustn't miss this opportunity to start to position themselves as a safe place. And this is why we need to talk to parents about our international curriculum so that they know that when they're sending their children back to places like Nigeria, Ghana, that the curriculum is equivalent to what is on offer. We need to talk to parents about the extracurricular activities that we have that is all cultural as well. We need to talk to parents about the benefits we have to offer as a destination. Helen, I'm just going to pause if you have anything, I mean, just from your Ghana experience, is anything you want to just add to this session before I open it up to others?
Well, I just want to agree with you. I worked in a boarding school here in Ghana, and I just want to give you two examples of students that we had, one from the US, one from the UK. The student from the US was getting into gangs in Utah, was not doing very well. They told him he was coming to meet his, to visit his grandma here in Accra, and bought him a one-way ticket. He didn't realize. And I have to say, he spent the first 3 weeks with his hoodie over his head in the hot African sun, and was a nightmare. And when he left 4 years later, I do not think there was a dry eye as he gives his final speech as head of the student body. And I think we are not taking enough opportunities to really draw these children in. I think there's a lot of parents out there in the UK and in America, especially with all the Black Lives Matter stuff that's going on at the moment. And I think there's a lot of parents that would, if we offered them a good opportunity, that they would take it on. The other example I have is, apparently it is when it's your 13th birthday that you get initiated into the gangs in London. And I had one boy turn up, again, half-term holidays, told him that he was coming over to see family for half-term, a week before his 13th birthday, and he stayed with us for just 1 year. This is now 3 years later. I'm still in touch with Mum, and she's, you know, he's still a cheeky chappy, but he is completely different in his mindset. And I think that's what West African schools can do really well. It's, you know, the academics, you guys can match anybody for the academics. It's the other things that you can offer. You can offer the safety. You can offer the opportunities for them to understand the culture and the language. But I think we should really be selling ourselves as, come to West Africa, we are a safe haven, which might sound to a lot of people as a very strange situation to be trying to sell ourselves as. But, well, I've been here in West Africa 20 years, and touch wood, you know, there's not been any major problems apart from our earthquake yesterday in Accra. You need to get out there and sell yourselves. I also like the idea of selling the online language. I know I also own a school here. We've also already talked about it, about starting to sell tree lessons to the London market. Good luck with it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Helen. And like I said, what we're saying here is not just a talk shop. So at the end of today's session, I'll be looking forward to schools saying to us, we want you to take us on that journey, because we know that it's one thing to have the school running in Nigeria. It's another thing to have the connections with the families in, you know, in Nigeria, sorry, in the UK or other destinations as well. Between Tosin, myself, and Akan, we've also worked across so many of the African states as well. So our relationship is not just limited to the US, UK, Canada, but also within Africa as well. So if there are schools here that are willing to explore the international market with us, they'll be very happy to have further conversations with you. But I wonder if anybody has any burning questions so far from what you've heard, I'm very happy to unmute you, and then you can, if there's something you were not clear about, or if there are schools already on this platform who are already taking international students from the US, UK, Canada, for example, if you have some thoughts to share with us as well, that would be most useful. So I'm going to open the floor now to take just some questions. Okay, you can perhaps just raise your hand and then I can unmute you. Okay, well, I'm taking it to sound like everybody's okay. Okay, I'm going to allow Mr. Oye Ojo to speak from Oxbridge. Hello, sir. I think I've.
Good afternoon, Mr. Baker.
Good afternoon,
can you hear
sir.
Me, please?
I can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
Yes. I would like to start by first of all appreciating you for this initiative, and I will say it's a right step in the right direction. While you were making your presentation, I was making some jottings, and it actually resonates with some of the things we have in the front burner at Oxbridge. Yes, we know that we are now in what we call the new normal, and we definitely have to change the narratives. The aspect of connecting to parents in the diaspora is key, especially bearing in mind the current development about COVID-19, and we cannot overemphasize the fact that we need to actually extend the dragnet to such clients.
Absolutely.
Yes, virtually all schools in this age are online, but the key thing, based on what you have said, is how we can be strategic to ensure that we are actually focusing on the right targets. Let me just share some of the few things that we have also brought on board as a contribution, because I want to look at it from the context of collaboration and not competition.
That's right.
Yes, because by collaborating, it will be like a win-win affair for all. As part of our standard practice, of course, we conduct entrance exam, but we have shifted focus by making our exam virtual. We now have what we call online entrance exam. And what does that suggest? It means by and large that wherever you may be as a candidate, you can write our virtual entrance exam. And the arrangement is seamless. So it's something that we have actually brought on board and is working for us. Incidentally, Saturday last week, we had the second in our series of entrance exam, and we are planning for the next one come July 18, it's Saturday. And we do have what we call a trial run with the candidates so that they are abreast with expectation for the main exam. We are also looking in the direction of the summer school as well, virtual summer school. And let me even say this, you mentioned a key aspect that which we are also trying to incorporate, yes, in the planning process, which is the aspect of culture.
Yes, sir.
You have spoken rightly to the intent that parents in the diaspora, yes, and as much as they will be pleased to bring their words back home, they are also concerned about how we can actually integrate it into our culture. And that is what we are actually considering to a very great extent. So I will say I commend what you are doing. It's still a learning process because we don't know it all. You can still learn from those who are in the industry, and that actually lends credence to what we call collaboration. Thanks so
much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ojo. I appreciate those thoughts. Thank you, sir. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I can see that. Just trying to see if there were any questions on the chat thing, but I think just also following up from what Mr. Ojo just said. I mean, one of the things I would also just add is also he's used a very key word that we've got to be strategic, and I really think that having worked with schools in the UK for the last sort of 15 years or so, as well as schools across Africa, I think sometimes what we also need to improve upon tends to be our presentation. The product itself is, in my opinion, very often the same, but it's really how we've packaged it that sometimes is the issue. We need to realize that we're selling to parents who are very digital as well. We're selling to parents who are now on the sort of iPad generation, and we also must speak their language as well. So I think schools traditionally have had this impression that people will come to us anyway. We're a good school, we have the results, but I think that doesn't really cut it anymore. Being a good school is great, but good schools must also be at the forefront of communicating what they're doing to parents. Good schools must also be at the forefront of, sending out newsletters, carrying parents along as well. So I think these are things that schools must really emphasize and think about as we approach this new normal. We've done our research, so we're confident that the market is there. It's not speculative. It's actually a fact that the market is there, but schools must really tap into it in a very strategic, professional manner, because you're dealing with parents who live outside the country, and for that reason, they would expect a particular kind of approach as well. I think I gave an example during the last series that I remember a school in Lagos. I can't really mention the names, but it's one of the very old private schools in Nigeria. And I remember when I was school shopping for my son, I went on their website, and one of the things that made me really chuckle was that on their website they said that we are proud of our Britishness, and I thought that was quite a ridiculous thing to say in a way, because as a parent coming from the diaspora, I'm looking for a school that is real in its Nigerian and African roots. Yes, it teaches a British curriculum, nothing wrong with that, but a Nigerian school can never compete with a British school to give a British experience. Number one, you don't have snow. You would never have snow. So you can't give him a real British experience. You don't have fish and chips. There are things you do best that you better focus on that than things. I think schools must be real. You tick all the boxes. We do the Cambridge checkpoint. We do the EdExcel. We do all these international exams. But we also offer a unique African experience, which means that your children have the right worldview. It's very important that coming here gives them a balanced worldview of their life in Europe and their life outside. Sorry. Okay. So somebody's saying that they can't hear me. Is that the same for everybody or just for Helen? Okay. I'm going to bring in Mrs. Aino as well. Okay. Good to see you back. Okay. There's another question. I'm just going to allow you in. Okay. You're now in, madam. Not sure if it's, I've got Ayotunde Aino. Please, can you carry on? Questions?
Hello.
Yes, I can.
Okay. We're talking about strategy. Does the structure, I mean, in terms of physical structure of the school really matter? When strategizing, preparing for the virtual learning. In my school, we do history, we do civic education, we do Yoruba, and so I'll be interested in linking up with parents in the diaspora. So does the structure of the school in terms of building, does it really matter?
The structure of the school in terms of the, I just want to be sure I'm getting that. The structure of the school?
The building of the school.
Oh, the building, okay. That's a very good question. So does the building of the school still matter? Yes. I think that's a very, very good question. I mean, for the diaspora parents you're running a virtual learning experience for, I don't think they're interested in the structure. I think they're interested in the content of what you would deliver. And, you know, so I think they'll be looking at that. But of course, from the diaspora parent that wants to bring their child back to Nigeria physically, they may have questions on structure. They may have questions on what things looks like. I know that there are parents in the diaspora who they don't want their children to feel they are being punished, so they will have to meet them halfway. Even though they went to schools that it was bunk beds and fans, they might think, well, this child has come from a very cold weather. Maybe an air conditioning in the room is the least we'll be looking for. So I think parents have their own personal preference, but when it comes to the virtual program, and this is why I think that it should not be a limitation as to, you know, you have to really have an assessment of your school, and maybe what is best for us is a virtual experience. And another school might think, well, actually, we can do both. Or some might say, well, we'll start with virtual experience for now, and then we'll build from there. So you may just want to start where you're comfortable with. But I can tell you that the language aspect is going to be very key. Any school offering that, that packages that very well, and maybe create some additional materials where you give the children homework and is due every week or every 2 weeks, and you're giving them feedback, so that it's not just online, but there's also a feedback mechanism. I think you will see that parents will be very interested in that in the diaspora.
Okay. So are you going to be the link between us and the parents?
Yes, we will be the link between you and the parent, because we already have a conversation going. So like I said, on Ben Television, which is the largest diaspora TV in the UK, we host a bi-weekly event already where we feature a Nigerian school and we mention what is on offer. Actually, African schools, not just Nigerian schools. So that program is targeted for families in the diaspora. And our objective is to serve schools like yours and other schools on this platform to reach out to families here in the diaspora.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, there's a question here or comment that is the webinar going to be made available to the soft copy? Yes, it will be. The soft copy from the last session is already on the main conference website, so we will make sure that this is uploaded as well once the necessary edits have been completed. Okay. Okay, I'm getting ready to hand over to the next speaker, but I just wanted to in closing, I think this would just be my sort of closing thoughts. My closing thoughts would be that at a time where budgets are squeezed, at a time where schools are looking at various options, this is a good time to expand your offering in a creative way, reaching out to parents in the diaspora, reaching out to parents perhaps in other African countries through the work we are doing here at TIEC and CIEC, and working with you particularly during this season to creatively look at ways to improve your earnings, your income as a school. But of course, there are certain things that schools must also get right in terms of their policies, their safeguards, because parents coming from and international perspectives, we'll be looking more at those things, your international exams. There are things you must still demonstrate to them at a minimum, because even if it's an online virtual teaching experience, be it summer experience, parents still want to be sure that whoever is teaching their child virtually doesn't have a criminal history of molesting children and grooming children online, because yes, they may not have that physical interaction, but they have a virtual interaction that can lead to influence as well. So parents are still mindful. So a school must get those basics in place first, having the right teachers, having the right technology as well. Like I said, I think every school here should have something on their website, I'll say from tomorrow or even today, that says that even if you're still working on it, that we welcome international students. We welcome international students. We have a package for parents where we can pick the children from the airport when they arrive. We have a package for students coming from abroad, that where the child may not have a family in maybe Lagos or Accra, there are other families within the school that can host them for a small fee. They don't have to go back home during all the midterm breaks. They can stay back and pay a small fee. These are the things that makes doing business with your school easy. And you have to explain those things to parents, because if you don't do that, then they don't have an understanding of how you support that child. Many of those parents left many, many years ago, so their perspective of schools in Africa and Nigeria might be limited. So you have to demonstrate to them that we'll make this process easy for you. You just put them on the plane, we collect them. When the session is over, we send them back to the airport, and somebody would, make sure they get on the plane and back home. When they are still new in the country or new in school, we're calling home maybe every week just to make sure they settle down. I think these are the things you might need to do to onboard that child properly. So that's sort of my final thought. We're just getting ready now to hand over to Dr. Akanimo, who will be focusing more on the sort of partnerships for schools and how schools can leverage on that. Dr. Akanimo, are you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So what I'm going to have to do is just make you the host of this session. Dr. Akanimo has a very long CV, so I always like him to do the introduction himself. All I would say about him is that as far as the UK is concerned, he is one of the most respected authority when it comes to Africa, engagement of students, partnerships when it comes to building relations between schools in the UK and schools in Africa, and vice versa. Widely traveled across Africa and is considered an authority in this area. So he spoke at the last EDS in early June, and because of his contribution is actually one of the reasons why we carved out this session specifically for schools. So I'm going to hand over to him now, make you the host, and we'll take it from there. Okay, over to you now, Dr. Akan. I think you need to accept to be the host.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen. I've got about 35, 40 minutes. Yeah?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So, good afternoon, everybody, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks to Binga and TIEC for putting this together, and also greetings to my incredible panelists. I can see Helen. I've not met you before, but quite exciting contributions, and also my good friend Tosin. So yeah, so what I want to do really is kind of give some kind of a framework around the term internationalization. And I think that it's an important term to consider. So in my job, like Benga said, I travel an awful lot and I cover over 30 countries in Africa. And so generally speaking, when you go to a university, or rather even a school, whether primary or secondary school, the likelihood of the nomenclature, the naming of a school would attract the word international. So you'd hear Lagbaja International School, or Ndubisi International School, or Favor and Promise International School. And it's quite an interesting term to use to describe what your school, I mean, the naming of your school. So I guess the point is, how many school owners or proprietors actually do understand, or in some sense have critiqued the use of the term international? And that's quite important. Because when you do understand what dimensions of international means, and that's from the root word for the word internationalization, then you kind of put things in perspective, and the series of struggles and challenges you do face will be a lot more reduced. And so I know we are at a point in a COVID era where there is so much struggles. I know, for example, I've been speaking with many school owners in the last several weeks, and they've been struggling heavily with respect to paying staff salaries and tuition fees. Some were already struggling even before COVID, and then with COVID came on board, it became a bit more difficult. And the reason is obviously because, I mean, the people are not paying for tuition fees. How can you pay salaries? So I remember a story happened that was 2 years ago. I mean, when this my fascination, because in my job I deal a lot with universities. So I only started researching into schools in the last 2-3 years. See, but the point is, the models are the same. Education as a supply chain, in terms of the structure or in terms of the frameworks, are very similar. Even though those peculiarities might differ in terms of tertiary education as compared to secondary education, but it's basically the same. So the back end story is the fact that I was trying to put together an international workshop in the UK for Nigerian proprietors and school owners. And I had finished putting this together, and with all the mapping. They were to come into the UK, spend like a week, which would involve some face-to-face sessions, and obviously some sessions are going to go and see other specific schools for potential partnerships. And I remember I'd sent the flyer we designed to my partner in Abuja. And I was like, well, can we start marketing? Okay, a few hours after, she calls me and she goes, hey, doc, sorry, there's no way this is possible. I said, what do you mean? And she was like, it's absolutely impossible to hold a workshop in the UK around, I think it was September. Now, I didn't quite understand what she meant, but it was the vivid, almost like the vivid way she pushed through that is non-negotiable, which will never happen. So I started investigating, what do you mean? Is this something wrong with September? I mean, in the UK, it's not very cold yet. So is it the weather? Then I was surprised when she told me, she said, that's the period where many school owners receive tuition fees payment. That it would be almost impossible, and in fact, almost abominable, to get a school owner to leave Nigeria to a workshop, no matter how great, just in the middle of when tuition fees is being paid. And that for me was like an eye-opener. I was like, really? So then I started doing my research because I'm a researcher at heart. So as I travel across different countries, whether I'm in Botswana or I'm in Namibia, or I'm it doesn't matter which country I go to, I discovered that the average school owner in most African countries, Nigeria inclusive, depends wholly on tuition fees payment. And I know as a business expert, any business model, any model that depends fundamentally on one revenue stream, that model is fundamentally wrong. That's a fact. Any model, it doesn't matter what it is. Because imagine, you're thrown in a COVID situation, you are stuck on dependence on your tuition fees. Well, your model is wrong, which is the reason why you can no longer earn. So that is a fundamental premise for any business strategy. You cannot depend fully and wholly on one source of revenue. That's a wrong model. So I've always known that. So if there's a dependence on tuition fees, you might think you're successful, but what it also means is the fact that you're not as successful in terms of your revenue capacity or your impact as you're supposed to be if you understood simple strategies. So I want to share a few with you today. Now, normally I do this session for a 2-day training. But obviously, I've spoken to Benga. Benga has told me to try and kind of streamline this within 30 minutes to 45 to 40 minutes, which is a bit difficult, but I'll try my best. So I'm going to kind of rush through it, but just pick up the key points as I proceed. And midway, I'm going to stop and actually ask specific questions, and I would like you to just respond in the chat, because I think that kind of forms a framework as to how we deliver this. So that's the first premise. So the first question I want to ask, and I'd like you to respond to this question by typing in the chat, because I want to get a conversation going. The question is this: is education a product or a service? Can we respond, please? Just respond in the chat button. The question is very simple. Is education, the term education, which obviously is what you do, is why you created your school, would you call it a product or a service? Let me see responses. Who is saying what? Please say. Both. So Akwagu says it's both. Anybody else? Okay, Helen says it's a service. Chika says it's a service. That's a very interesting. Okay, Ayotuna says it's both. Okay, TIC says it's a service. Someone says both. That's quite interesting. Okay, you know what? Now, everybody on the group is correct, but I asked the question, is a product and also a service. I asked the question to lay a basis to an interesting dimension. So now, by economic definition, if you're an economist or you did business, okay, a product is defined as something tangible, okay? While a service is an intangible offer. That's the basic economic definition of a product and a service. So a product you can touch, a service you cannot. That's basic. So in that sense, you really can touch education. So appropriately supposed to be a service. Now I want to bring up a picture. So how many of us know about the dimension where banks, like banks, they call what they do banking products? And you begin to wonder, why is that the case? Why do banks call the offer of you opening a bank account a banking product? Why do banks offer, if you like, if maybe a new bank account for, say, parents to give them scholarships, but they will call it a banking scholarship product? Why is that, even though it's not tangible by economic definition? Now, by my research, it shows clearly that actually the reason why you would align, or if you like, you would appropriate the term a product even to a service, is what you try to do, therefore, is you reduce the vagueness of the offer. Because when you say a service, it almost seems that you can't touch it. So why am I worried? Is the reason why most people don't like people that call themselves consultants very much. So if you call yourself a consultant, you go to a client and you're saying, I'm going to analyze the framework of the dynamics of your resource. And the guy says, so how much is that? And you say 1 million naira. He said, for what? Because the person cannot touch what you are offering. It's like a theoretical rhetoric concept you're charging for. And so to be able to appropriate, okay, the tangible nature of a service, you term it a product. Okay. Now, and that's very important, because once you understand that, and you're all correct, education is both a product and a service. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So you see the reality of a service in tangible terms, like money. That's very true. Because actually, what you do by appropriating education as a product is that it makes you think a bit differently about it. When I was growing up back in Nigeria, I used to hear the term that a teacher's reward is in heaven. I'm sure most of you have heard that. Oh, don't worry, it's a charitable service. Just help the children. Your reward is in heaven. There's no money. There is no financial capacity in education. That's a lie. Because ultimately, education, I'll even go a step further and tell you categorically that education is actually an innovative product. Are you following me? Now, that's very important. So now when you talk about innovative products, let me paint you a picture of what it therefore means. So if you're owner of a school and you understand education is a product, and as a matter of fact, it's supposed to be an innovative product. So I want to paint you a picture of how innovative products work. Innovative products, they work as a response to target market. So my point is, you cannot give a product without constant analysis and understanding of your customer. So second question, I'd like you guys to respond in the chat session. So for your school, as a school, who is your customer? Can you write it down? Is it the parent or the kids? Who is the customer? And don't worry, everything will make sense in a minute. Just trying to lay a foundation because it's very important. Before I start talking about the actual dimension of internationalization on how you can increase your revenue profile. So, who is your customer? If education is your product, who is the customer? Is it is it the parent or the children or the kids? So Kanye said both. Chika said both. Akwagu says parents. That's interesting. Anybody else? I can explain where I'm going with this. Okay, wait, let's stop at that point. Now, the children first and then the parents. Okay, good. So now, I'm going back to the economic definitions of a customer, okay? Economically, and this is very important. Economically, a customer is the person who pays for value. So basically, the person who you exchange money for, value you give. So the person who pays actually is your customer in real terms. That's actually true economically. Okay, so it means therefore that maybe a good way to paint the picture is this. You see Pampers, like that's Pampers nappy, that particular product. Would you say that the customer of Pampers, your customer or Pampers manufacturer, is the baby or the mother? Anybody? Can you respond, please? I want to make it as interactive as possible, but because in the interaction, what I'm trying to paint a picture of becomes clear. So if the Pampers manufacturer, I think it's Cousins, I can't remember the company called now, yeah. Who is their main customer, their target customer? Is it the baby or the mother? Okay, you know what? As a matter of fact, you will not see a Pampers advertisement that has been designed for the baby. It's because the mother is the one that pays for Pampers. So as a matter of fact, the design of the advertisement, follow me, the advertisement for the exchange of the product for the service or for financial remuneration is designed because the target market for that manufacturer for that particular product is the mother, is the person who pays, they are most interested in. Everything is designed to influence the emotional connectivity of a mother watching that advert in order to buy the product. Now, why is all this important? So I want to maybe kind of wrap it up with the final question. Now, do you reckon that there is a difference between if I called you a proprietor? Follow me, this is very important. If I called you the proprietor of a school, which you are, and if I called you, I mean, I say differently. If I called you the proprietor, follow me, of a secondary school, and if I called you the chief executive of a knowledge enterprise, so the question I'm asking is that the same thing or is it different? Can you respond? Is it the same? Is it different? If I called you the proprietor of a school, and if I called you the chief executive of a knowledge enterprise, is it the same thing I'm saying? Or is it different? Same, different. Can you respond, please? Then all this will become clear in a minute. It's different. That's interesting, Kennedy. So Kennedy thinks it's different. Anybody else? Okay, TIC says it's different, okay? Anybody else? So I can proceed. It's different. Now listen very carefully. So now the point is this. So most people are saying it's different. Now, as a matter of fact, the way to see it is this. By nomenclature, it is different, but in essence, it's the same. Because you are the head of the school, so you are the chief executive of a knowledge enterprise. But that means you need to see your establishment, even if you call it a secondary school, as a knowledge enterprise, because that's actually what it is. What the kids or the parents are paying for is knowledge that you're imparting on the kids. So your parents are your customers because they pay, but it means that your children are also part of your supply value chain because they are what you might call the carriers of your value enhancers, your value carriers that those parents pay for. So everything is closely knit. So why am I saying this? So the first thing is this. Do you actually appreciate the power of understanding who your parents are? You know, I've done this for over 5 years and I travel all around and I asked a basic question. And I think it became more interesting in the last couple of years. I go and meet a school owner to do a consultancy and I ask them, So how much do you know your parent? And I'm quite shocked and surprised how little a school owner knows about the parent. You might know roughly that, okay, they drive a nice car, but that's all you know. Do you know what your parents do? Do you know where they work? Do you know how much they earn? And you're wondering why is that important? Of course it's important. I mean, you think if as a chief executive, if you knew your parent, okay, that paid you that particular tuition fees, okay, had extra money left somewhere in spare cash to pay for other things, might it affect you the capacity or the potential for you to develop other new value propositions for the parents to still pay for it? Of course you can, but the point is you have to know your parents first. How much do you know your parents? The kids are fine because you are always with them, but the kids are not the people who pay you fees. The parents are. So how much do you know your customer? That's very important because it's the beginning of your business model. If you don't know your customer enough to know what they like, where they want to go when they're relaxing, my goodness, what is the point of being a chief executive? So let me paint you a picture using an actual product so you can actually see the value by comparison. Let's take Coke as an example because that's a physical product you can touch. So back in the beginning, Coca-Cola, they drink, yeah? They had Coke. And then after many years, Coke discovered that some people like Coca-Cola, but they don't like sugar at all. So what did Coke do? Coke produced Coke, same flavor, but no sugar, and they call it Coke Zero. Are you following me? Now, not long after, I think it was probably before, Coke discovered some people like Coke, but they want reduced sugar. So they still like sugar, but not so much. So Coke made Coke, and then they reduced the sugar. And what did they call it? They called it Diet Coke. Are you following me? Now, not long after, Coke discovered that some people love Coke, but they also love other flavors, like strawberry, like cherry. So what did Coke do? Coke made Coke, and then they introduced a new flavor into the Coca-Cola. So when you're drinking Coke, it's the same Coke, but there's now a fresh flavor to Coke. And they call it Coke with flavors. Are you following me? Now, I think for me, the one that really showed me what was going on was when Coke made Coca-Cola and they did something else. They now introduced nomenclature. So basically, you can buy Coke and attach someone's name to it. So normal Coke might cost maybe 100 naira, but Coke with somebody's name, Chief Lagbaja, attached to the Coke can now cost 1,000 naira. What was Coke doing? Coke was tapping into the ego, if you like, the ego or the ownership or that lovely feeling of having your name attached to your product. So what is Coke doing? Who can respond, please? I just took you through a process of what product innovation is. So what is Coke doing? Can someone respond? I'm looking for a particular word. Just put it in the chat. By all these different dimensions, what is Coke as a company? What are they doing? Market segmentation, that's a really good word. I'm looking for another word, but that's very correct. Know their customer, that's very good. I'm looking for a word. I mean, what is their current action? The word I'm looking for is innovate. Coke constantly is innovating. And you cannot, that's very value enhancement, but I'm looking for the word innovation. So you cannot innovate without research. You can't innovate without knowing your customer, you're correct, without value enhancement. So look at yourself as a school. What you were offering the kids in school and your customer, which are your parents, this year, is it the same thing you were offering them 3 years ago? If it's the same, that means you are a CEO who is not innovating. And the interesting thing is, it's actually interesting and actually easy to innovate as long as you know your customer. That's very fundamental. So basically, my point is, how much do you innovate in your offer? That's very important. So now, that takes me to having that in place. Can you still see my screen? Can you also see my screen, yeah?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just want to be sure we all can. So now, what you find on the screen now, it's, let me see. Where are you? So what you have on the screen now is actually, I'm trying to get a picture. Okay, good. So what you've got is a list of criteria which I've termed internationalization criteria. I've done lots of research and I've traveled across different African countries to get a feel, or get a sense as to what makes a school truly international, okay? And there are about 8 dimensions that are listed on your screen. You can write them down. So I'll quickly run through them. International students, international staff, international programs, international partners, international research and impact, international funding, international outlook, and international presence. Now, with these dimensions is what makes you a truly international school. As a matter of fact, these dimensions remain the same, whether you're a secondary school or a university. So I want to make a point. So can you look through that list? And I want to ask a quick question. So there are 8 on the list. Who can tell me on the list which of these dimensions is the easiest and the quickest and the cheapest for you as a school owner or proprietor or chief executive to fulfill? Of the 8, which is the easiest, the quickest, and the cheapest to achieve? Responses, please. There are 8 there. Which of them? Anyone? Programs? Someone said Outlook. Okay. Someone said Outlook. Helen said Outlook. That's fantastic. Anybody else interested? Okay. Chika said Outlook. That's fantastic. Outlook. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. You know what? Now you're absolutely correct. Okay. The cheapest, the easiest, and the quickest to achieve of the list of 8 dimensions of internationalization is actually your outlook. That is because your outlook is in your mind, it's your perspective, it's your insight, it's how you view yourself. Because once you get that right, it affects everything else. Maybe I'll paint you with a small picture. So can you see that picture on the screen? Yeah? Fantastic. Now, that picture on the screen is a story I heard about a marketing executive. I want to paint a picture. A marketing executive. So there's a drinks company, and they were struggling with the sales of their drink as a product. And so they called a young marketing executive to come and design a marketing campaign to increase the sales of the drink. And this young man came on board, and they had so much work, sessions, meetings, and here and there, and they designed a nice visual marketing campaign to increase the sales of the drink. And that was the campaign. So they fixed a date for the release and launch, and they went to market, and they rolled out this campaign. Now, what happened is that the very next day, after the campaign was rolled out, they discovered that the sales of the drink, it was actually an energy drink, plummeted worse than it was before they invited the marketing executive to come around. And there was panic in everywhere. What happened? Why has our sales reduced? It's supposed to increase after the marketing advert has gone out. And then they called everybody to the room, and there was panic. And then they discovered that the country where they launched, they read from right to left. So look at your screen. They read. So it was released in the Middle East, the first campaign. And they read from right to left. So a young woman wakes up in the morning and goes, so I am strong and running. I take the drink, then I collapse. Then you know in Nigeria, you say, Utofiakpa, God forbid, I will never touch that drink. The importance of understanding your landscape. I remember another story about a shoe company, follow me, a shoe company called 2 young executives to go to a country to go and kind of do a market research about the feasibility for the sales of their shoes. So they went to this country. When they got there, they did 2 weeks of research work, and they both wrote different reports. The first researcher said, this country is the worst market we can ever go into because they don't wear any shoes. The second researcher, his report said, that country is our best market because they haven't started wearing shoes. So we can introduce shoe wearing to them. Same market, different perspectives. You cannot overemphasize the importance of your outlook. Let me paint here even a simpler picture, like a real picture. So Lancaster University, I'm sure you know this. If you look at most UK universities and or even international universities, they market themselves, for example, by the number of international students they have. It's like a massive badge on their homepage of their website. We have students from 100 countries. Why is that important? Why are they boasting and promoting that? Because their outlook is right. Because when their outlook is right, it affects all the 7 other dimensions. And so international student is important and fundamental, almost non-negotiable to an international university, the same way it should be for international school. Now, so what happened? So 5 years ago, Lancaster University in the UK set up a campus in Ghana. Now, I happen to advise Lancaster University. I'm their Africa advisor as well. So I flew into Ghana, Accra, and that was like within a year of setting up the Ghana campus of Lancaster University. And I was having a conversation with the provost of the university. And I said, this was in Accra, and I said, sir, so currently how many students do you have from how many countries? And I was surprised when he told me that they've got students from 18 countries within 1 year. It doesn't matter where they go. The outlook of being truly international remains the same. Interestingly, some 10 minutes or 20 minutes drive down the road, you have the University of Ghana that has been in existence to thy kingdom come. And University of Ghana, to boast of students from 10 countries would be a stretch. But a university came on board, and within 1 year, they have students from 18 African countries. You know the reason why? Because in the setup, they design an international recruitment strategy that they must get students from other countries. And guess what? It's actually not as difficult as it is. But the question is, how many proprietors of school owners even consider it an option in the first place? It's because the outlook is all right in the first place. So back to the list. Your outlook, because your outlook affects everything. So now, why am I saying this? So you see myself, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, I call myself an Africa expert because this affects many things. And I'm Nigerian. I've always been Nigerian. I will always be Nigerian. But the point is, in my perspective, to be truly international, because I've got those dimensions, I know for a fact, and I'll run through them very quickly. Okay? Now, international students. How difficult is it to get international students? Actually, it's not. You know why? Because if you look through your list, if you went on LinkedIn, you would find somebody, in some sense, there are agents in different countries. If it is clear to you and you know that it's important in the first place, it affects your strategy to make it happen. Interestingly, when I travel to places like Kenya, I go to places like Uganda in Kampala. I've lost count how many times. Like school owners, follow me, school owners will tell me, oh, is it possible for you to arrange for an international partnership with a Nigerian school so Kenyan students can come to Nigeria for a summer school program? These are Kenyan students asking me this. I go to places like Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Francophone speaking West African countries, and school owners will tell me that, Doc, is it possible to find a Nigerian partner or an English school partner that can help us establish English programs for our English market? That's because the mistake most folks in Anglophone speaking countries make is they think that everybody in Francophone countries speak French. It's not true. They actually do have an English market, but they struggle because their English market have to look for premium schools and even go overseas to go and attend English speaking programs. So there's a leverage for partnerships. So it means therefore you can actually be positioned, follow me, positioned as a school owner in Nigeria, but through partnerships, you actually have schools and students from other countries that doesn't impact on your facilities because there is a requirement and a demand for what you are offering. It's about perspectives. Perspectives. So I'll paint you a picture. So now, understanding that you can have access to international students. And today we'll be speaking about online learning, virtual learning. You do realize that if you spend some time, and I'm just giving you perspectives, yeah, and put together a virtual learning environment and offer good programs. The beauty with the online environment is it doesn't restrict you by space. That means a Cameroonian can actually subscribe. A Cameroonian who has been looking for an English program can subscribe to take online programs in English with your school without having to leave Cameroon. It's about perspectives. How do you understand your space, education space? Nigeria is amazing. Nigeria is 200 million people. But in the scheme of things, Nigeria is too small. Africa is 1 billion people, 55 countries. There are many countries that actually require what you do, but you haven't understood their perspective, your outlook as an international school. As long as you are good at what you do, Nigerians are paying for it. It means that if you are quite strategic, other people will pay for the same service, but you haven't gone outside the box. When you restrict your space, you restrict your place. Are you following me? Now, so why is that important? Because it means, therefore, you can begin to operate as a true chief executive, which you are, and see education as a leverage and an offer, because you are here to impact many people's lives. And the continent is large enough if you can do an alignment. Let me give you an example of what I mean, a practical example. So currently, I've got an online program. It's a career online program, very powerful, okay? And it's been designed for professionals, people working in schools, people who own schools. It's a very powerful program. Now, so to launch the program, because of my connections, yeah, I arranged to do a pilot. I spoke to the Commissioner of Education in Zambia, and they gave me a list, follow me, of 30 school owners in Zambia. And then working through NAPS, you know NAPS in Nigeria, so the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools. Or through NAPS, NAPS gave me a list of 30 school owners. So follow me, I combined 30 school owners in Zambia and 30 school owners in Nigeria into one WhatsApp group for my pilot. That pilot began to run 3 weeks ago. So they all had access to the online program to do everything because it was very impressive. Everything I'm telling you here is on the program. But my point is this. After 2 weeks, what they didn't realize is that I had set a small trap. And what was the trap? After 2 weeks of them being together in the same group, I asked a question during one of my sessions on the group. And I said, so it's been 2 weeks and all of you know that you are in the same WhatsApp group with Zambian school owners. I asked, how many Nigerian school owners in the group have had a private conversation, maybe by way of a DM, with a Zambian school owner on the group, asking them, so what do you do? How is your school in Zambia? How is your tuition fees? What are the issues you have? And I asked the same thing of the Zambians. Guess what? In 2 weeks, nobody has had a cross conversation, even when I provided a platform for them to have a communication. It's because the perspective, the outlook is not right. If you see me, because my outlook is right, it influences everything I do. I almost go out of my way to increase my leverage because I have discovered that once your space is enlarged, it impacts on your opportunities. How can you be broke as a school owner when there are many people looking for what you do, but you are restricting yourself to a small space in a small location? It's different. I'll give you another story. So, as a true example. So, as I travel around, I address many groups of school owners. I address 300 school owners in Zambia, 200 school owners in Kenya. And as I address the school owners, there's a fundamental question I keep asking many people. I'm these school owners, and I ask them. So, and I want to ask on this group too. So let's see who responds. So you are school owners and proprietors. So can I ask, how many of you have a partnership or an MOU with a university around your area? Can you respond, please? In the group right now, how many of you have an MOU or an agreement or a working relationship with a university? And you're wondering why I'm asking, I'll explain in a minute. It's about perspectives. How many of you? Oh, yo, Joe, okay, you got a partnership with the university. That's interesting. You know, I've been asking this for over 2 years. I've asked over 5,000 school owners across different countries. and less than 2% of them even consider it important. They're asking me, why is that even important in the first place? Now, let me explain why it's important so you can get the picture. So, follow me. A school, secondary school, provides students that goes into universities, and yet they don't speak with universities. The same way a university provides students that go into industry, and yet they don't speak with industry. So that is the simple explanation of a disconnected educational supply chain. Helen, thanks very much for that contribution. Helen Hartley, Sri Lanka University. Now that's the explanation of a disconnected supply chain. Are you following me? How can you not have a partnership of some sort with a university close by? You do remember, though, that every university in Nigeria, there is a department they all have. You know what it is? Department of Education. What do you think they do in the Department of Education of a university? You know what they do? They research you. They actually do research. There are professors, senior lecturer 1, senior lecturer 2, who their basis for promotion from lecturer 2 to lecturer 1 is doing research and publishing paper about you, about schools. So much so that a university, after graduating a student for first degree, bachelor's degree in education, what's the first thing they do? They send them to go for teaching practice. Where? In schools. So that means inherently there's already a partnership between school owners and universities, but no school owner has been able to exploit. My goodness, do you know how much power you have? That a university depends on your products, depends on your value for them to survive. A university cannot survive without a secondary school. You knowing that as a chief executive, my goodness, you can do many things with that. You can. A typical example. So just few months ago, that's before this lockdown, what did I do? I applied for a grant and I won a grant, £800,000. It's a Lancaster University grant, research grant. And in that grant, University of Benin in Nigeria is a partner on the research grant. But guess what? In the grant, there is a small section, okay, that was designed for demonstration secondary school that is resident in Uniben. And what section? Section is that the grant research, at the end of it, they will produce simple, if I can, teaching tools to showcase the plan that the grant is producing to engage kids at secondary school. So my point is, a secondary school is a partner on a research grant with a money allocation to them. Do you know how much we allocated? 40 million naira is what the allocation is within the bigger grant. Come on. Do you know how much grant this education department apply for? Do you know the power of your school or you yourself as a proprietor being represented in research papers being published because you are part of the crew? I'm talking about models of internationalization. International students, international staff. And before you say, well, hey, doc, it's expensive to get international staff. No, it's not. It's because you haven't looked for. I've gone to many African countries where many African countries are saying, can you give us a space for us to come and teach in another location in Nigeria? They already have family relations. They just want an opportunity to go and teach somewhere. You haven't advertised. When you have an international staff in your school from Kenya, what does it mean? By implication, it means that when you have a Kenyan teacher in your school, it means it will attract a lot more Kenyan students. So everything is connected. Those models of internationalization is connected. It means you can actually create a space to charge more fees for international students, just the way any school does. International partners. Let's talk about partnerships. Now, if I asked and said, so how many of you as a school owner have international partners in other countries? Can you showcase by telling me which country do you have an international partner with? Go on. I'm wrapping up now. Can you tell me in the response, please? Can you tell me which countries do you have international partners with? It's on the list. Yes, anybody? I mean, when I mean partners, people outside your country, outside Nigeria. Okay, so maybe I'll just wrap up. So listen very carefully. UK majorly, that's fantastic. UK is amazing. But guess what? You are actually missing the trick. You can operate a lot more business in African countries that you can never do in the UK. I know today, most have been spoken about selling your products and your service to parents in diaspora. But you are missing a big trick. There are many parents around you, French-speaking countries, looking for English schools to send their kids to. But you haven't promoted yourself as being able to do that. UK is nice, but guess what? You cannot compare the leverage you have within Africa when compared to the UK. It's a fact. It's very true. So what can you do simply? You know, as simple as using your LinkedIn profile, you can find a partner within 5 minutes. There is a search a button in all social media platforms called the search button. But people don't realize. And I ask people, well, what do you do on your LinkedIn, by the way? It's because if you went on LinkedIn, just search international schools in Kenya, international schools in Uganda. A list would pop up. Do some analysis and introduce yourself. Tell somebody, my name is so and so. I am the school owner of a social international school in Nigeria. And I discovered that you are also the school owner of a school in Cameroon. Is it possible for us to have a conversation for a potential partnership? That is how it starts. You need to show yourself. But having said that though, how can you show yourself when you're not even visible in that space? So a good way to do this is this. So I mean, I like doing it, but it's interesting, but you see my point. If I Googled your name as a school owner, what will come up? It's a question, it's a simple question. Try it now. If I Googled your name or your school, what would come up? If Google is having epilepsy to find your school, that means we haven't begun the journey of internationalization yet. If Google is telling you, do you mean so and so? That means Google has looked everywhere and can't find you. And it's not giving you some ideas of what you might mean. No. It means you have to consciously promote yourself. You know, as simple as having your profile on LinkedIn, as simple as it is, many school owners don't understand that. If I asked you, how many pages is your CV? You might have like a 10-page CV, and you should, because you've done so much work in education. But how many pages is on your LinkedIn profile? You'll be surprised. I've asked this question everywhere I go, and it's always less than 1 or 2 pages. So let me get this right. The CV that shows your capacity and your school's leverage is 10 pages, but it's gathering dust on the laptop. But the profile that is open to the world to showcase what you do is only 2 pages. Then what's the point? It's about outlook and perspectives. So I've dealt with a few things already. I've tried dealing with international students because I'm rushing through this thing. Don't forget, I told you I do this as a 2-day session. And I've captured most of this in my online course for those who are interested. But generally speaking, I've done international students, giving you a sense of international staff, international partners, international research. You can be involved as a school owner in critical education research, international outlook, international presence. And I'm sorry, at this session, I don't have time to go through the specific details of how to engage with all of this session because it's very, very comprehensive. I've only given you a perspective overview that you are restricting your capacity, you are restricting your business space, you are restricting your leverage as a school owner to be able to function and make a lot of money and still making impact in the education space. So I want to finish with a simple analysis. There is nothing as fantastic, follow me, than for a school owner to go overseas to attend international workshops. Are you follow me? So my last question. So how many of you in the group in the last 6 months, before COVID, obviously, have attended international events in education? I mean events outside your country. Can you give me a sense of it in the group, please? I'm wrapping up now. How many of us, within 6 months before COVID, have attended international conferences outside Nigeria? or outside your country of residence? How many of us? Anybody? Chika, fantastic. Chika has. You know, I believe strongly, yeah. You heard me say before as I began that I cover 30 countries. So last year I did over 25 countries. The year before last, over 25 countries. As a matter of fact, before March this year, I've done 6 countries already. But that's not even the real gist. I want to leave you with this. The real gist is that the last time I remember paying for international flights, accommodation, for all my trips I've mentioned, from my own pocket, was over 4 years ago. You know why? Because people know what I do enough to look for me. And if you want me to come and do something for you, you have to cover international flights and workshops. So perspectives and outlook affects everything. It does. It puts you in a position of control and a clarity of your space. You can operate as a true international expert. Final question. What do you prefer of these two? And I'm ending with this. Which do you prefer of these two statements that you prefer to call yourself? I am a Nigerian proprietor and I want to delve in international space. That's the first statement. Follow me. The first statement is, I am a Nigerian proprietor and I want to delve in international space. Statement 2, I am an international proprietor. I only happen to live in Nigeria. Which do you prefer? And on that note, I conclude. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much. So we really appreciate that. I would, as always, just open the floor because obviously you covered a lot. I know I compromised your time. This is a longer presentation than you've given us. But I just wondered if you're happy to take some questions.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So we've got time to take just a couple of questions, observations, or maybe an aspect you're not very clear about.
You're welcome, Okwago. Thanks, Helen. Any questions? So like I told you, I did rush those different dimensions very, very much. So there are many things I didn't say at all. So, but that's the point. This can be continued later. So like Benga was saying, we have many things we put together. So if you want a lot more consultation on a personal level to grow your school, internationalize your staff, there are simple models of doing that. Very simple and even very cheap models. Yeah, I mean, so Helen asked a question: is it important to be international? I mean, it's not compulsory to be international, but it just makes life easy. I mean, especially if you already call yourself an international school, so be one. It's okay to be a local school and just focus on your local market. Nobody's saying you should not. But the point is, if you focus on that, you better have a cracking strategy to sustain yourself, because we live in a global era where everything's interconnected. So if you're complaining about not having enough money, struggling with tuition fees and all of that, then maybe it's time to try a different landscape to what you do. Yes, please, Helen, proceed. Yes, Helen, I respond. Is it important to be international? Yes.
Hi, I'm only playing the devil's advocate, so just bear with me.
That's fine.
I own a very small private school here in Ghana. It's not, I do a lot of consultancy work as well. So we're talking about all these different things that you do so you don't get all your money in one place. I do all of that.
That's fantastic.
And I've had this argument many times with school owners, school boards, what makes an international school international? So when I opened my school 3 years ago, I deliberately said, I am not an international school.
That's fantastic.
Now, when I looked down your list,
yeah,
which I'm pleased to see, because last week you talked about the 9, or 2 weeks ago, but I didn't see them.
Okay.
I fulfill every criteria except for program.
Interesting.
And the reason I did that is because most of the children who are in my school are mixed race.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And we made a clear decision that we didn't want to go with an international program. And what we've done is we've taken aspects of the international program. We are in the context of Ghana.
Okay.
So instead of doing foreign languages, we actually do Twi, which is our local language. Well, it's not quite our local language. We're in a Ga area, but it's the one that's spoken widely. So I love your 9 points. I agree with, for my school, I agree with 8 of them. We do the funding, we do the research.
So Helen,
the only one we don't do is the specific program. And that's because for my school, we were important that we were within our context. And I think for all these school owners, I think there's a real debate is you can still use international programs, but you can still be very much focused here in Africa. We have so much to give here, and we need to make sure that we don't lose our Africanness by becoming too international.
So let me ask, so Helen, you made a really very powerful point. And actually, I want to understand that. That's actually very correct. So my point is that, see, when I was speaking with Benga, the premise of doing this was to say that many school owners are complaining that they're struggling. And I can see a reason why they're struggling financially if there is only one source of revenue. So when you tell me that you have many sources of revenue, it shows to me that you are already thinking differently outside the box. You are a true chief executive. But let me even narrow it down even further. Let's look at international programs. The beauty is this. You don't even have to be international. If you think outside the box, you can be self-sustaining. What do I mean? So let's remove international from the word, international programs. When I say programs, I don't just mean curriculum that is being passed down from the government, you teach in class. A program is what? A collection of an idea, an initiative through which you pass knowledge. So what do I mean? Now, you know, if you go to, say in Lagos State has a main curriculum, which they give to everybody. Every school have a particular curriculum they all respond to. But what differentiates a curriculum delivery from the other is the innovation behind the curriculum. So what do I mean? Imagine if I knew. So if I got so inspired by studying the international education market that I've now decided to open my own school to show an example of how I think things should be done differently. Now, why am I saying so? Imagine I knew from my market segmentation that 20 or 30% of my parents love football. Follow me on this. What do you think I might do that might be interesting? I might decide, because I know by my market survey of my customer that 20% of my parents love football. I would decide to hold a football competition on a Saturday morning between parents and teachers as a way of engaging 20% of my parents who I know love football. If I knew that 30% of my parents are religious and they are pastors, what might I do as a program of engagement? I might be able to organize you might call it a preaching competition for their kids on one evening as a way to engage the parents to come and see kids preach, because the parents love this and the kids love it too. What am I saying? Programs doesn't just necessarily mean people can hear me. Can you hear me, Ellen? Can people hear me? You can hear me? Okay, that's fine. Program doesn't necessarily mean what you teach in the class, A for apple, B for ball. No, that's not what I mean by program. Program is a collation of everything you develop and deliver by context or framework. It's what a program is. That's very important. And let me even end by saying this. So, as a research, I attended over 200 PTA meetings intentionally to even understand what happens in PTA meetings. Obviously, not only me and some of my team members. And I was surprised when my report came through and my results that most PTA meetings are avenues for argument. People just go there to say who didn't pay fees, who paid less fees, which parent beat what parent, what teacher beat. Why are you doing all of that? So convert your PTA meeting to a business meeting. In your next PTA letter, tell your parents that you are invited to a business meeting of engaging with the parents as partners. It's about thinking about things a bit more differently, even if you remain local. Yes? Sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akan. I appreciate that. I mean, the goal of this session, once again, was to bring in a different perspective. I mean, I know different schools here on different journeys, but it's really to bring us to a point where we're thinking about things from a perspective of outlook, from the perspective of our curriculum. I know very often schools will say to me, well, we want to be an international school, but we cannot afford to have international teachers from overseas. And you think, well, that's just one element of what makes you an international school. There are other things you can do quite easily. And I must say, though, that I know there's some schools here that may disagree, that a school that has maybe a British headmaster or Canadian headmaster with everybody else being a Nigerian teaching staff and all Nigerian students, I doubt if that is international just because of one person.
No, it's not.
So we may need to rethink what it really means to be international.
And Benga, can I say something very quickly? Yeah, just
Yes.
along this point, because this is very important. So I started doing a little research because everything I told you is based on research. It's very important for you, so you know. And my research shows that the difference between, follow me, between a school, just for as an example, that charges 5,000 naira for a semester, as an example, and a school that charges 10,000 naira for a semester, most of the time, over 90% of the time, the major difference between both of them, guess what, is based on infrastructure. It's because this school probably has more toilets or a nicer playroom or a bigger reception than this school. Most of the time is based on infrastructure, but that is actually where the problem lies. So a good way to appreciate this is I flipped it over and started asking parents. And the question is very simple. Parents, which would you prefer? So take your child to a school where the infrastructure is okay. It's not fantastic, like literally, I mean, like off the charts fantastic, like infrastructure wise, but it's okay. But my goodness, the content, the programs, the initiatives is off the charts. Which would you prefer? I've asked that question for 2 years. The normal average parent prefers the school whose infrastructure is just okay, is workable, but the content and leverage is fantastic. That shows that you can increase your school without spending too much money on infrastructure if your content and initiatives is good.
Fantastic. I think that's actually an excellent way to actually end this session because, very often the question is always about the outlook or the fabric of an institution rather than the actual content and the customer experience within that content. So thank you very much for shedding light on that. I'm going to open it up before Tosin comes on. Just if there were any burning thoughts, I mean, it would be good to hear from schools. I mean, you got Helen, you got Dr. Akan will still be in the background. Dr. Akan, you mind just switching me back as the host?
Okay, please.
Thank you. No, you've got to enable that. It will be good to hear from schools. I mean, if there are particular issues that are, because part of coming on this session as well is to ensure that there might be particular issues that haven't been covered so far, but you've got combined experience here that can answer all those questions. So just to give you a bit of a scenario as well with what Dr. Akan said, I've been speaking to schools in the UK, for example, and a lot of schools in the UK have said to me that, yes, we've had challenges with numbers. some parents may be leaving us, but at the same time, we've been able to make up for it with another program we're running online or a summer school. So you're hearing examples of, well, we had a problem in this aspect, but another aspect has been opened up. So there's that aspect of multiple sources of income, so that it's not just tuition fees. So people are becoming a lot more creative, particularly in this season, looking at non-traditional means of getting students in. So I think I may have a question. Let's see. Okay, so there's a question here. So the question here is, how do primary schools be part of this internationalization process? I'm going to have a quick stab at that, and I'll allow Dr. Akan come in as well. I think we've got Helen there. I know very often people think that a lot of these solutions address secondary schools, universities, for example, but I think that primary school can also start that. I look at schools in the UK, for example, they would always have a twin school somewhere in Africa, for example. So a school in Oxford may have a twin school in Malawi, in Ghana, for example. I am a director of a college here in Cambridge, and I know that a college in Nigeria and our college in Cambridge did a project collaboration on a British Council project. So what happened was that the school in Nigeria, so we did a research about banking, how banking operates in the UK and how it operates in Nigeria. My students in the UK did an interview with bankers in the UK. The Nigerian students did an interview with banks in Nigeria. And then we had a Skype session where we shared notes. Oh, this is what happens here, this is what happens there. And that's international collaborations already, where this school in Nigeria can now put on newsletters to parents that we have collaborative partnerships with this school in the UK. They don't really need to have, forgive me, a white principal. International. They've proven internationalization by collaboration with the school. They didn't have to spend money. All it involved was being on Skype. It could be Zoom. And there's that collaboration. Another good example could be where you twin with a school in the UK, which once again, we're very happy to help you with this, and Dr. Aken as well, and Tosin will be coming up shortly. And you can share resources, for example. You can have schools in the UK learn about the culture of your country, for example. That enriches their experience as a primary school in Oxford, in Cambridge, in London, and vice versa. Your students can also learn on their own culture. Why did they celebrate Remembrance Day, for example? Why did they celebrate, America celebrate Thanksgiving, for example? So I think primary schools can be involved. And in fact, when we start at the primary level, when the children then move up to secondary and sixth form, they're already used to that culture of engaging with other people. It doesn't have to be the UK. You can start with Ghana. You can start, Helen is here. I'm sure she's a primary school. I can set you both up as a way of collaborating. So this could be a way that a primary school can come on board, and I'm sure other people may want to throw some light on that as well.
So maybe a way to, I want to paint a picture. So I spoke about the educational supply chain. That's important because you move from primary to secondary to university. So I always tell school owners, the easiest way to know what to do differently, okay, and be innovative, and also be well differentiated, is to find out what is lacking at the next level of the supply chain and then provide it, no matter how rudimentary. So what do I mean? So right now, everyone knows universities struggle from making youth employable. There is a gap, everyone knows that, between what you study in university and industry. So if I was a secondary school owner, what should I do? I introduce elements of industry at secondary school level. Any parent in his right mind would know this one is different, because you're bridging a gap that is normally usually missing in the next level of the supply chain. So if I move it a bit backward, I'm talking about strategy now, to primary school. A primary school owner Find out what the secondary school people are not doing right now, and you can start the foundation in primary school level. That is your differentiator on that point. It's because you have to see everything as a holistic supply chain, because it actually is. Whether they move from your school, primary level to secondary school, or to someone else's school, it doesn't matter. Education is a supply chain, it's level by level. So anybody who is able to provide something at its own level that is missing at the next level is the differentiator. So I'll give an example. Before you will say, okay, well, it's very difficult. So for example, if I knew the portfolio and profile of all my parents, whether primary school or secondary school, they actually have jobs, don't they? On that list, you find people who are maybe CEOs of company who work somewhere. I would love to arrange as a small internship program, maybe once every 2 months. My students at primary school go for a school visit in one of the companies of the parents. Have you done a letter say, oh, parents, based on our analysis, you are the parent and you work in such a company. Would you be okay to join our initiative of company engagement for our kids? No parent will say no. I've tried it many times. They always say yes, but because you haven't asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's a good point. So that's another area that I think I like, that idea of what's happening at the next level. So if you're a sixth form, what's happening at university that we can start introducing our students to? If we're a secondary school, what are they doing at the next level up? If we're primary school, what are they going to meet at the next level up? So just thinking ahead and being innovative is something that certainly would put you ahead. So does that answer your question, Mrs. Chika? Does that answer your question? Great. But whilst I'm waiting on that as well, I want to just emphasize again that something that we're really pushing for, I mean, you're going to see a lot of that tomorrow with schools from Botswana, China, is that the collaboration can start now. You can start with people already within this network. So Helen is in Ghana, for example. We don't need to wait till everything is in place. So imagine if you put in your newsletter, your promotional materials for September, that we form this relationship with XYZ school. Parents are already seeing that there's something different, there's a value added, because right now we're all having to justify value added. It's not just enough to say to parents that we're offering an educational experience where they pass exams. Parents are saying, well, they can do that online now. So we need to offer them things that are not easily available. So going that extra mile for parents will be very key. Helen, do you want to add anything before we move on? I think you're Helen? How primary schools can be internationalized and have an international outlook?
Yeah, I think as well as there being the connections, I know that at least we've been open 3 years, and at least once a term I get asked by a British school. Often a lot of my those that I went to university with, who are now head teachers, are going, oh, Helen, can we link up with you? There's always schools in the UK looking for a link in Africa. It's a great and easy way to start.
Especially now.
However, I think there's so much more primary schools can do. I think giving assemblies are really important. Little children, they start off by knowing about themselves, and then their family, then their classmates, then their bigger community. I live here in a village, we learn about the village. Now we're learning about Accra, and it constantly goes up. And the only reason that children will know and understand is if people talk to them about the international. Now, I'm really upset at the moment that schools are not open, because I want to talk to my kids about Black Lives Matter. You know, we had an earthquake here last night. I want to talk to my kids about the earthquake and how that all fits into the bigger package. And I think by giving them the information is really important. But again, it's that widening of community. It doesn't always have to start international, but it has to start with the next community up. I'm going to give you a great example of this. I had, when I first opened my school, my first student that enrolled, apart from my daughter, moved on and left us and went to the local JHS school, the junior high school. And her little brother comes to the school, and she came up one day to pick him up on a Friday afternoon and went, "Why are we not in school on Monday? I know it's a public holiday, but nobody told me why. If I was still in the Smile School, we would know why." And it's about giving them that bit of information that sees them part of the bigger picture before they even get to the international bit. It's about expanding their knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Before we move, just one final opportunity for any other question before we move to Tosin's session. Okay, I'm going to be switching over to Tosin in a minute, but I think just to also throw in as well that I think that talking about recruitment and retention, schools can also look at how they engage the alumni community as well. I think not many schools leverage on the alumni community, and storytelling is very important. Where have they gone? Primary school can tell a story of the next step. Secondary can tell a story of the next step. And I think that, the whole science or art of international or of recruitment, whether it's local or international, there's a lot of storytelling that needs to follow. People need to know. Sometimes you're aware of what is happening, but your customers may not be aware. So we need to keep telling stories on these are past students. This is what they've done as well. And I know Tosin will be touching a lot about retention in his session, but something else I've seen also in the UK in this lockdown season has been where current teachers are being utilized to almost as part of the recruitment strategy for the next academic year. So you have teachers who are doing WhatsApp lessons, you have teachers doing Zoom lessons, but because of what they're doing, parents are also seeing how far the school is going. The teachers are going the extra mile on behalf of the student. And I think that in itself gives a recruitment message to the parent that this is a school that goes the extra mile. So there's still a lot schools can do. So, before you have a marketing team that maybe will go out to exhibitions, will go out and talk on behalf of your school, right now you have those teachers taking sessions as maybe your marketing executive as well. I think they also need to know that they represent your brand in recruitment of new students, but also in retention of your existing students. So I hope that's helpful for some people. I'm now going to switch over to Tosin. Tosin was with us in the last session on day 2. Tosin is an international officer that works for Sussex University. Before then, he was at Portsmouth University. Once again, in the UK and across Africa, a respected figure when it comes to student recruitment, retention, as well as adding value to your student experience. So I'm now going to make you the host, Tosin. Tosin, are you with us now?
I am. Can you hear me?
Great. I'm just going to make you the host, so because I know you're going to be sharing your screen with us.
Sure thing. Right. Can you see me? Can you hear me, Benga?
Yes, we can hear you, but I'm just going to make you the host. Just bear with me, please.
No problem.
Right, so you've now been made the host. There will be I know some people may drop out at some point, but we will prepare, just like the last sessions, we'll prepare some materials that we'll also send out to schools on the whole aspect of recruitment, marketing, retention, even things on social media engagement as well. How do schools take advantage of that? Right now, over to you, Tosin.
Brilliant. Thanks, Benga. I've had so much fun just listening to everybody. It's been brilliant. And seriously, the conversations have been absolutely stimulating. And Benga and everyone at CIT, well done for putting this together. I think it's a brilliant initiative. And you know how I feel about this space. And I think we don't collaborate enough across as educators in Africa. And so well done for leading this initiative. Now, I mean, this is me. Hello, everybody. I'm sure you can see me. It's also good to actually hear a few people are currently participating, like Mr. Oye, Mr. Ojo in Lagos. So thanks for joining the session. I'm going to switch to my presentation because, as you can see, me and Benga, we never share for a long time, and my airline done the receipt. So I will move it to the next, and I'll go into pretty much, I think I'm sharing now. Benga, let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Fantastic. So just give me a second to, fantastic. So I'm going to try and not really repeat. I think Ellen's conversation, Akan's stimulating conversation, and what Benga has been facilitating this so well. So I'm just going to try and bring it all together in a little bit and give some practical examples. For those of you who know me, I work at Sussex, as Benga said, and one of the things I've always been interested in doing is thinking about how we could always do things differently. It's always made me a bit amused sometimes when I see that, when I go around, because my job allows me to travel a lot. So I take care of Africa and the Middle East for Sussex. So that means I travel around the world and I get to see different things. I mean, when we're talking about international outlook just now, it exposes your mind and you see things, but you also see things that, wow, how are we not doing something different? Why is it that the more I go around, the more I see a pattern that there doesn't seem to be a lot of innovation in the education space. And you see people who are doing some really good things, but at the same time, you still think, people are still attending fairs as if that's the only way. That's how I went to study in the UK. I went to a fair and then decided to apply by myself. And that still seems to be the thing people do. Universities and schools still see themselves in that transactional relationship rather than, look, we are actually embedded. We are a value chain, as Akan has already said earlier. And how can we, innovation that we're creating for both sides, actually scale up and scale down? And I've always found that fascinating. So in the process, I took it as a challenge. So when I joined Sussex, I decided that, I'm going to think about the recruitment very differently. And I'm going to develop something which I was going to move from the idea of just having a unique selling point. Oh, we're number 1 in the world for this, we're number 10 in the world. Everybody has that. But can you create a unique value proposition for a university that stands out from everybody else? And I thought that excites me. And I took that as a challenge. Now, that's not easy, being a Black person who has these crazy ideas on how we want to come and do something that nobody else has done before, because we all have that limiting beliefs as well. And that mindset that we talked about just earlier. So that's me. I do this for Sussex, but I also run a whole bunch of other initiatives. And I'll tell you how those initiatives might actually be able to support you. So that leads me to this. So this is what I'll really cover today, is looking at what I've been able to do at Sussex. And I'll show you some of the outcomes of that. Can you actually adopt something similar and develop your own unique value proposition, especially in this time? Is it actually possible? Well, I think it is possible. And I always ask the question, what's there to lose? If you know this definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. What do you have to lose by trying a different approach? And now that everybody's thinking differently, maybe now people will be more receptive to exploring these new dimensions to how we co-create and how we innovate. Now, recruitment is critical. And I can use a very good example as well, is at many universities, we all get our money mostly from international students, postgraduate level especially, who come in and pay. They come in and pay. Some universities then have distance learning and they come in and pay. But are there different models that you can use to expand your business model? Are there different ways that you can actually create third stream income beyond just maybe the first two? And as Akan said earlier, any business model that actually has one stream is flawed. And is there a second? Is there a third? Is there even a fourth stream model for your business within your general premise? And I thought, okay, we started to explore different things. So we developed a lot of executive development programs. That's something that then we run a lot on. we started to develop a lot in terms of teacher training programs. We started to look at who are our stakeholders and how can we actually create value for them first. And when that value is actually being created, it is something people will pay for. Then that leads on to retention. I mean, for teachers and school owners, there's nothing more difficult and more frustrating that you spend all of that money to get these kids in. You know what it costs you. Some people, I don't know if some of you have actually done the cost per head for your recruitment and the cost per head for actually training a student versus if that student then decides to withdraw or leave for whatever reason. So what we then have now is it's difficult enough to recruit now, but the ones you have in your pipeline, they leave and maybe go somewhere else. Your retention. And how can you look at your retention to support your recruitment? Is there a way you can bring the two together rather than looking at it in that silo mentality? Because don't forget, so when I was listening to the conversations earlier today, which I thought were absolutely brilliant, is there are different schools here today who are, different size, different finances, different income stream, different funding. But one thing you all have is the capacity, your staff, and the creativity. There's nobody that has a monotony on creativity right now. And the level of your creativity and innovation is something that you can actually control right now. And I'll tell you some of that in a minute. So picking back on some of those questions that were asked earlier, should we actually be playing local, regional, or international? To be honest, I will not tell you what I say that's the definite answer, because there are practical reasons and constraints that each school might face. That means you may necessarily have to play local or play regional or play international by the value of your maybe capacity, your physical size, your human capacity, all that kind of stuff. Admittedly, yes. But then what is really international? What makes for that international outlook that we've been talking about so much today? Well, a lot of it is your international, your students. Let's not say international students, your students, right? Then your staff, right? And then the student experience. So if you then have, and then you have your curriculum. So let's just actually say it's 4 and you got your curriculum. Many of you want international curriculums already, or you're thinking about it. So in many ways, you could also lay the claim to international. But is that all? Is that all? What exactly? How do you brand yourself as international? Because don't forget, that is something that you already have, and you can run an international curriculum. Then you then have your international staff. Some of you may have resources to bring some people. Some of you may not have the resources to bring some people in. So you may be constrained by the level of investment and funding that you have to grow your staff. But what you are not constrained by is your international outlook and how you create an international student experience. That is something I personally believe that we could actually impact. And that's the area that I'm going to focus on. And I'm also going to actually try and give you an idea, because I heard the conversations earlier about, stimulating conversations about should we go local, should we be looking abroad, or should we be focusing on Africa? I personally believe that it's not either or. I think you can do both. I think we should be thinking about what are the international challenges. How can we play internationally? How can we have international challenges with local impact? Because at the end of the day, we want to serve our own community. We want to empower our own students within our own space, but we also want them to have the international outlook to be able to engage with any student, with any issues around the world. So that's how I've generally approached this debate personally. So talking about the issue of mindset, some of the things we were talking about earlier when Benga was also doing his talk is why we think we can't do these things, or why we think that we need to look outside. We think we're not good enough for some reason, or we are limiting our own self because of the perception in which we go into our own strategies. We think sometimes that, well, we're Africa, so if I go to these people, they won't really listen to me. If I develop this idea, but you haven't tried that, so how do you know? And that's why I want you to actually type in the text box right now. For some of you, I want to see what the answers you put in there are. What are your top 3 concerns for over the next 12 months? What are they for you as a school owner? What are the things that are bothering you right now? And I'll tell you in a minute why those things are important. Because you may be surprised that what you think that you're facing might be an issue for just Africa, but it wouldn't. In most cases, some of the challenges that we're all facing right now as school owners, as educators, they're actually quite global. And what we were saying earlier is, how can you then link up what you're doing in your school to create value for those people that you sometimes work with them in a transactional way rather than as value chain? So what are your top 3 concerns? I'm keen to hear what some of those are. I'm going to look at them now. Staffing, cash flow, retainment, brilliant. And again, keep it coming, because thanks, Ellen, for sharing that. Because what that says is, if you look at, in principle, staffing, cash flow, a lot of that then goes to your recruitment, because when you get your recruitment, the money that comes in from your recruitment, again from Mr. Ojo, your cash flow. But what streams do those cash flow come from? What streams do those, beyond just the normal recruitment that you take to the end, how else have you expanded that? And then retainment, which we've talked about earlier, which is what I'm focusing on. And then learners, exactly, preparing learners with learning difficulties. Now, this is where I sum it up for you. All these issues that you've identified, universities are facing it. It's what we're talking about at Sussex right now. It's what I know other UK universities, American universities are talking about right now. We may just be higher education, and maybe you service the secondary education or further education. At the end of the day, the issues are the same. And the person that can come up with an innovation or an innovative way of being able to service their key stakeholders, nobody's talking about disrupting the entire economy. That's not what we're talking about. But if you can find out what those issues are, because as it affects you, how then does it affect the parents? And then how does it affect the learners? And those are the issues I want. So if you look at the second question, what drives a successful retention strategy? So we all know that retention is going to be a bigger issue now. Those students that we've gotten, you've spent all that money, marketing, everything to bring them in. How do you keep them? What if they leave and go somewhere else? How much do you lose? What is the biggest impact? Who influences that the most? What's the thing that can make the biggest impact on your retention strategy? Type that question. Let me see it. Again, this is all part of things we've discussed today. But it's interesting that being able to just hear them and be able to see that we're all thinking alike, it's a really good way to share knowledge. Parents, thank you, CIC. So CIC said parents that are, and again, there are parents who are very much critical influencer in this because they pay the money. And as Akan was saying earlier, who is it that you're serving, right? So if the parents are the one who determines the retention, what about the person who's actually doing the studying? It's the students. So how are we working with the students and the parents, the economy, retention as well? All of that, funny enough, they are all part of the bigger issue here. Parents, policies, government, all of that cuts in. But I'm going to then give you my own take. Like I said, I'm sharing my own opinion on this just by my years of experience in this sector and just going around and seeing how things are being done. And because of the research that we've done at Sussex, what we're focusing on, we're really narrowing it down to the students, to what we're calling the awarding gap and the attainment gap and the success gap. Students, why do they drop out? Why do they leave? It's really around everything is the student experience. And all these other things are the factors that directly informs that. So we may not always be able to, don't forget, we're not teaching the parents. We got the curriculum. our funding, we can try what we can do to do that, and maybe we can get the money or we may not get the money. But what we do have constant is our students. So how are we engaging those students in new ways to make sure that they stay, but then they also, you see them as your future ambassadors? There's nothing much, Africans, we know this now, word of mouth. I personally have come to the opinion that the student experience, if you can get that right, it then leads to your students getting better attainment in terms of the grades, which is what you then want to show to the parents. To say, look, here is our students, this is the kind of grades they're getting. But look, we're not just sending them to class. This is how we're teaching them. This is how we're innovating in our pedagogy. This is what makes us different from all the other schools. And you can innovate around that. And that's what we're focusing on a lot at Sussex. And the last question is about your recruitment. Because again, it's about linking those two together. How can one feed into the other? You should not be looking at them. If you have separate teams at the moment that take care of recruitment and another team that take care of retention, maybe the academic staff take care of retention and the recruit, and they don't talk to each other, you need to start getting them to talk to each other. Because the success stories that you're already having, the experiences that are happening in the classroom are some of the things that should be reflected in your marketing. Does that make sense? The way those students are developing and growing on a personal level and on a professional level is what those parents and other students are interested in. These students are all online at the moment. They're all digital. So when they see aspirational role models, when they see people who are actually young leaders, and if that is how your school is really engaging your students and co-creating that curriculum with them, then that is what I'm actually pushing here. Now, I said I was going to share a little bit about what we did at Sussex, right? When I came to Sussex about 7 years ago, we were not very well known university in Nigeria at all. And I told you this story when I started. And I said, okay, I want to do something different. But before I do that, I need to know what it is that I want to zero in on. What do I want to focus on that makes Sussex unique? And then in 5 years' time, or in 4 years' time, how do I want that future to look like? And I started to, and this is where we are now at Sussex. We've got amazing visibility in Nigeria. The British Council just did a survey and they said we have the largest imprint in Nigeria. We have the largest evening scholars from Nigerian student scholars in the UK. And even the UK Trade Commissioner, Emma Wade-Smith, actually said the strategy that we have in terms of how we work in Africa is something that she would want UK universities to adopt. Now, why have we been able to do this when every other university has been there for ages? Why are you able to consider your own marketing, your own strategy within your own schools that doesn't limit you? You know, in the earlier side, I talked about your dichotomy of control. The dichotomy of control, sometimes we obsess on the things we cannot control. And I do a lot, but I just thought, what can we actually control? And I'll tell you how we did that at Sussex. And this is something that hopefully could be relevant to some of you. Now, that's our Vice Chancellor at the University of Sussex. Leadership, that's why I put leadership there, is key, right? But what I realized was to achieve what I wanted to get to, I needed to decide on what is it that is unique to me at this university? What is something that we have that maybe others don't have as much, or maybe they don't have at all? So why do I need to go and reinvent the wheel and try and start creating something new? Is there something, a unique characteristic of my university that I have that I can leverage on and build that strategy around? And I think one of the speakers earlier talked about that. And I decided, wow, okay, this university is well known and it has a reputation for leaders, for producing world leaders. Now, many of these leaders are older people like President Thabo Mbeki, Festus Mugai, and all these other people. And I thought, okay, how about I then look at that reputation we have, what does it relate to in terms of actually on the ground in how we teach? Then we realized, okay, we have the Institute of Development Studies at Sussex, which is ranked #1 in the world. Then I just realized, right, what we could do here is how I can bring those two strengths of these universities together to build a brand that we stand for producing future leaders. And what are the youth telling me? So I have to go and talk to a lot of youth. I have to talk to a lot of alumni. What are the things that youth see as the future? What are the things that really inspire you? And they said, well, just leadership. How the young people don't want to be standing by anymore. We've seen it in Not Too Young to Run campaign. We've seen it in so many things. They are all citizen journalists. Students are able to do that. And I think the reason we just need to give them confidence. I think the creativity is there. We can unlock that. But confidence, we need to help them get that. And so what we did at Sussex over that last 4 or 5 years was bring it all together and identified some of these students that were just making things happen. And I supported them. The university came behind us and we really helped them develop some of their ideas. We helped them go out and go into their country when they finished and what other projects they are making in their country, we supported it. Then we reached out across sector. And this is where I think one of the speakers talked about it. You need to start taking a systems approach, I think, to how you look at your strategy. And a systems approach means cross sector. Because you're in education, doesn't mean you should talk only to education. At Sussex, we've worked with Gold.com. At Sussex, we've worked with Shell, and NNPC Shell Corp. We've worked with DHL. I'll give you the DHL one was just when post-study work was withdrawn in the UK. When they said, oh, you students from they took out the 2-year post-study work, I just thought, what else could we do? And I was like, okay, if students can't work here, how can we support students going back to give them placement opportunities that will lead to jobs when they get back home and give them a soft landing? No other UK university was doing it. I was like, that's something we could do. And people were like, oh, you know, it's hard, blah, blah. But let me ask the questions. Let me go to some companies and ask the questions. And I went to DHL. We had a conversation and we ran it. And after that, we started expanding. Again, until you actually explore some of these things, you will be surprised. Something I found out about education, the power of education, is the vehicle that opens doors. If you come to me and say you want to sell insurance, you know what I will tell you? I will just tell you, I better go away. If you come to me and you want to come and say you're a stockbroker or something, I'll think about it. But education, we all go through it at one stage of our life. And many of us, we actually have that passion for education. Even though we may not be directly educators ourselves, we have children or we have family members who are currently going through some issues. So what if you go into some of these cross-sector partners, they think beyond your current sphere, the people you work with, and then go and reach out to them. Find out, but build on your strengths. Don't go too much. What is the one thing or two things that your school is good at, that it has a history for, it has a reputation for? Then amplify it. That is how it started for us. And that's the model that we went with. So before you start thinking, okay, we want to do our recruitment and we want to start thinking about doing all the marketing and everything, do all of that. But in the background, work on this. If you spend time on this, you will get a unique strategy, a unique value proposition that you can create. But to do that, you must use your students. How many times have you got your students involved in creating your strategy? You have students doing marketing, doing business, doing courses. How many times have you asked them, you know what? How about you go and write our business plan for us? How about you go and write our strategy as part of your assignment today? How about you go and work on this. And then how about we work with you to run it? I did a course once with an MBA class at University of Lagos. And I went to these MBA students and it was a guest lecture. And I told them, you know what, the assignment I'm going to give you, go and develop a recruitment and engagement strategy for University of Lagos to recruit international students. And they thought, I was like, Mr. Tosi, this was too much. I said, no, but seriously, you're MBA students now, you can do this. And they were completely surprised because it's something that it's not been a way that they've actually, they go to MBA class and they sit down, somebody tells them, read this. And then sometimes, you go and get some guest lectures, you go for some seminars, but you don't really get to leverage on this expertise. So they were actually very happy that this guy is asking me. If you ask your students to come, they will feel value like you would never imagine. Bring them into your strategy. Make them a co-creating partner in your strategy. And that, I think, was one of the things I did at the very start. Yeah, so everything that we're talking about today is, thanks, Ellen, is focused on university, but it's applied. You can apply it, but you have to scale it down to engage your students. So, Ayotunde, does that make sense? So the same approach is exactly the same thing, because what you're trying to do is you want to know that, okay, the influencers are the students, my retention, I need my students, but I also need the parents. How can I work with my students? How can I develop a way of working with my students that is different from everybody else, that gives them skills for the 21st century, that gives them confidence, but also that inspires the parents to say, oh, that's this school, they are always doing new things. My kid comes back and they're telling me about this new initiative that even if it's primary school, I'll share some ideas with you, Ayotunde, in a minute, because I said I want to share a lot of examples with you guys. But I just thought this was a theoretical part of it, so you understand how we developed it. Because at the end of the day, you want to understand the framework, and then you build the solution. Okay? I hope that was helpful. So, retention. When you talk about retention, you've got to talk about, obviously, academic achievement, right? How are the students achieving? How are they doing? Are they passing? Are they failing? How are they getting on? How are they progressing? Is actually what they call it, academic progression. But then if you add both of those and your student engagement, here are some ideas that can help. And these are things that I've run at Sussex, and I've actually run with partners outside. And what Akan was saying earlier is, who are you creating for? Remember that question I asked you before? Who is it that you're actually creating for? Let me go back to that slide so you can see. Actually, no, I haven't reached that slide. It's the next slide. See, I got carried away there. So look at this again. Why can't you do this? Ayotunde, one of the things that we've done a lot, I'm a Lego Serious Play facilitator. I'm trained in running Lego Serious Play, and I've used it in a very different way from the way I was taught. I use it to engage students. I've used Lego to get students to write their personal statement. I've used Lego to get students to write their CV. I've used Lego to get students to talk to each other and share things with each other. I've used Lego to get students to what they've learned in class. How can we actually build something and talk around it using that Lego Serious Play? Because it's visual, it's kinesthetic. Kinesthetic means you're doing it with your hands, you're doing it with your eyes. Students nowadays, we know that learning nowadays, they want to be engaged. They need to be engaged. So that platform, we developed into what we call our Lego Learning Lab. And it helps the students to be creative, number one, but also to develop those three skills: creativity, collaboration, and communication. How is it in your schools, even if it's primary, it's secondary? How are you leveraging and you're equipping your kids with those three skills? Those three, all the other skills, they all come around those ones. But those three, and there are little things. Remember what we said earlier, you may not always have the money. You may be tied down by your curriculum, you may be tied down by your staff, but you can innovate internationally. And why can't you have a Lego where the students build solutions to things that are affecting them and they talk about it in their community? Something they saw in their day, maybe a news article, maybe Black Lives Matter. What does it mean, being Black? You have all these Lego, they're cheap. How can you have that a way to teach the students? Cultural competence. What I've done is I've developed, I'm also a trained action learning facilitator. Action learning essentially co-coaching. And I've developed this cultural exchange cafe because I thought one of the issues I noticed at universities, and I don't know to what extent, I've been to many international schools, but I can't say that I know the answer to this. So somebody can tell me if I'm wrong. But in universities, you will get students who will come to the UK and say, oh, British students don't talk. I was like that. They don't engage. And they'll say, oh, they just keep to themselves. And these people keep to. And I started thinking to myself, Why? Because I'm always asking that question. Why is it? What is it? And I reflected on my own experience. I spoke to some students. And what I realized is the relationships are left in the classroom. You cannot expect these students, young as they are, some of them from international, to just bond if you limit it to just the classroom. Yes, extracurricular is what I'm talking about here. But beyond that, how are you creating a safe space? How are you holding that space for these kids to learn that very valuable skill of cultural competence? If many of us had more cultural competence, some of the issues we're having with culture, Black Lives Matter now, why people can't understand each other, will not happen. If your students can engage, why can't your students engage? Why can't we run a cultural competence, something like this, with another school, with students in another country? What's stopping us from doing that? Why can't we do it in your schools in the UK, and get them peer coaching? The beauty of peer coaching is that it believes that everybody already has certain experiences, unique, that people usually have the solution to their own problems on a subconscious level. But you create this space where everybody can help each other by talking and reflecting and sharing. And that is so there are many so another one that Benga talked about is Aspire. So I set up a program at Sussex recently. It's called Aspire Mentoring. And the idea is it was designed mostly for students from Black and minority backgrounds. But what I want to do next with it is to create Aspire Mentoring for schools. So why can't we have Aspire mentors for your alumni? Benga already talked about this. Why are we not using our alumni more? They are some of those aspirational role models. Remember, we've done it at Sussex and it's proven to work. It has worked. So why can't we develop the same formula? Yes, yeah, exactly, Benga. Talk, reflect, share. And these are just some ideas and these are real products. When Akan was talking earlier about these are real products that we've developed, we've tested, and I've actually set up a radio show. Again, you may be wondering, what's this guy's job? My job is recruiting students, but I can't help myself. Just too much going on. I have ideas, but I also learned something: passion versus skill. Some of you may have seen some of the video that I did where I actually talked about the dichotomy of 21st century careers. It's on YouTube. You can look up Social DVC dichotomy of 21st century. And I reflected on skills and the passion hypothesis. Which one do we need? When we tell our kids, go and pursue your passion, I have nothing against that. But passion doesn't always fail. We know, and as Akan said earlier, that the teacher's reward is in heaven. All of those things, that mindset that we've been told, and we subscribe to it, right? But I also believe that sometimes if you develop skill, you try new things out, you expose yourself to trying new things, to learning new things. What you gather is something that somebody else that has not tried and exposed themselves to those new things, they don't have what we call career capital. So think about your stock market. Career capital means you develop capital that you trade later on, that you use for others. That's what we want to be helping our students have. You know why I set up the radio show? Simple. I went to Nigeria once. I was invited to a radio show to come and speak. And I went, and it was a good show, but I'm always the one speaking on the show as a guest. And then one day, this guy, this funny presenter was just so saying, how about you take the mic for like a few minutes and talk? And my people, I could not talk. I choked. And I have years and years of speaking. I just choked. I was embarrassed by myself. But the guy noticed and he very quickly helped me out. And I came back to Sussex and I thought, what are the things that I can do to solve this issue? But the only way to face your great fear is to tackle it on. And I came to Sussex and I set up a radio show. And then in the process, I started to do my research. No UK university has ever used radio show to recruit students. I mean, all UK universities actually have a student radio show. I then brought students together. I learned how to be a radio show host. I created it around students from different African countries. I won't lie to you. I recruited 4 students from that radio show, and they all came and became my co-hosts. So when they joined Sussex, some of them were already radio presenters in their country. So they were, Nigerians, we always talk in traffic now. So for me, I was like, what's the best way to come? Again, what do you have at your disposal that you can leverage quickly without thinking. Have a bias for action. Have a bias. Think big, start small, don't talk too much. Bias for action. What's the worst that would happen? Remember, with the school closed if you try this idea, but more importantly, let your students do it. All of these things are the things that nobody will be able to quantify to why Sussex has got the reputation it has, but these are some of the ways it happens. And when parents see it, they get inspired. They're like, that university is different. I hope that is making sense. So, question everything. Use these questions. These are the questions I started with. When I started, I won't lie to you, I just had a rough framework in my head. But over the years, I started to write them down. I started to articulate them down because I said, I'm going to go back to, I want to help other people, because if I'm African and I can come to this country and be able to do some of these things and try some of these new ways of doing things that people laugh, people joked initially. See, when you do the right thing, I'm chair of Beulah now, the British University International. And the reason is because people know, they feel that sourcing has value to create. I think, first of all, who is it I'm creating that value for? Who am I serving? Then I ask my question first. If I don't do it, who else will do it? And that's the question I'm going to ask you today. Because some of you would say that somebody else has probably done it. Or if it's such a good idea, why are other people not doing it? That's exactly the problem with innovation. Because if it's such a good idea, people have not done it because they are scared of this. Something that you've been thinking about doing and you've not done, that's what you should be doing. So I've covered that. Take a look at those questions again. Always ask that question. What if I tried it this way? We've done it this way. We've done before COVID. This is how we were recruited. So when I was hearing Mr. Oye talk about how they've now taken their recruitment and their exams online, brilliant. But did we need COVID to happen to do that? That is the question. Uncertainty. Something that has always been certain is uncertainty. So do we need to wait for the second wave of COVID? Or is this something that we just adopt creative innovation as a standard within our own spaces? Because as I said, you have your dichotomy of control. What can you control within your own university that can leverage your students into it to create value? But I think for me, the one that I would ask you to look at is, obviously, you know what problem you want to solve, but who else can benefit from your solution? Remember what Akan was saying earlier? When you have almost, I called it an integrated recruitment approach. That's what we did at Sussex, where I didn't just go in and say, I want to look at students. We work with NYSC. We have a strong partnership with NYSC. We work with civil society because all of these people are connected. We work with entrepreneurs. Tech Points Africa, we sponsor their events. We work with Future Africa Awards. We train the NUC. So educators, policymakers, boom, NUC. Universities, we have a strong university with Unilab and others. NYSC, youth empowerment, boom. Secondary school, we work a lot with Teach for Nigeria and many others. How do you then connect all your value chain like that? Nothing stops you from doing it. Universities are your part value chain. But why can't you come up with a solution and pitch it to them? Again, mindset. If you haven't told them, I can bet you, I work in a UK university, so I know. If I have a partner school that says Tosin, I have this idea I'm trying to do. I'll give you an example. There's a school in Kenya, right, that we've been talking a lot about doing stuff together. And I also run our Enactors at Sussex. So Enactors is like a social entrepreneurship team for university students. So I advise students and I help them develop their project. And this school was just thinking about they can be more creative and get to a bit more business entrepreneurship with their students. I was like, you know what? Let's set up a junior hour. So we set up a scheme called Jifunza. Jifunza in Swahili means teach yourself or learn yourself or something like that. And we then developed this as a social enterprise. And now we are helping them run a social enterprise that our students will be training their students, and then we start bringing I will pay to bring students to come because I know that those students are students I want to recruit. Does that make sense? I have run competitions across the continent, writing, essay, mooting, and I've paid for students to come to Sussex for 1 week experience. Those students have never traveled before. They will not even come to Sussex, but when I do it, I try to target some of those value chains. And they go back. One student came to Sussex and she did the best video I've ever seen in my life on her experience. That video is still on our Kenya page. Prospective students look at that. Students came, she won a competition that we ran. But why can't you win a competition for your university? Why does it have to be the other way? You have a sphere of influence that you're not leveraging. So this is a model that I thought would be helpful. Take a look at it. I'm happy to share this. Again, I believe I'm a very conceptual person. Then when I see the concept, I then deliver. Students are the center. Has to be student-centered. Transformative education. That all of these buzzwords, I've put the buzzwords there so that you can tie these buzzwords to the right part of that model. Engagement. What buzzwords? Pan-African, we've heard a lot of that today. Why do we always keep talking about working with overseas alone? Why are we not looking to create even a program that can get a student to study in East, West, South, North Africa? Why can't you bring a few schools together and create that? What is stopping you? Do you see? Enterprise. So this model, I'm not going to go over it too much because you know this, but I'm going to talk about well-being. This is a big issue, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger as these students come back from COVID-19, as the issues of how the students are, in terms of getting used for their careers, getting ready for future careers, how they are adapting to this crazy, fast-paced world. Well-being is becoming more and more. I do work with the Council of International Schools, and I'm actually helping them to look at how we can do something about it. And I'll share some of the really good initiatives that I'm working with Benga to put forward. And this, I think, could be of interest to you. But this model, I think it will be a good starting point. Just like 5-7 years ago, when I started at Sussex, I started with a model in mind. No audio. Benga, can you hear me? Okay, it's so you said no audio, Vivian. I'm not sure. Can you maybe just try again, unmute and mute again? Yeah, sorry about that. But Benga can hear me, so I'm assuming others can as well. And this is how, so moving on from framework, these are some practical things you can do today. Practical things. Like I said earlier, build on your strengths. I knew leadership was something Sussex was good at. I knew that we had a lot of defense for development studies, and we had some really good students, and I leveraged and amplified on that and built everything else around that. But first, you need to understand what the issues, what are the pain points. In design thinking, we call it pain points. How many times have you actually brought your students together and asked them, what are your problems? What are the things that you are facing? What are the things, when it comes to our studies, when it comes to your class, let's sit down and let's run a design sprint. We run design sprint. One of the products I'll share with you is a design sprint. And there are things you can do in a day. There are things you can do in it. Ayotunde can't hear me as well. Benga, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right. I'm not sure what's going on. Ayotunde can't hear me either. And Vivian can't hear me either. Can I check? Is anyone else aside from Benga able to hear me? Yeah, so I think some people can. Okay, some people can, some people can't. Thank you, thank you. So maybe, yeah. All right, so going to wrap up. But these are things I think you should work on, and we can help you with that with TIEC to actually get to understand the pain points of your students. But then we talk about SWOT analysis. Do a SWOT analysis, but get your students to do it. Easy exercises, and in the way, you also introduce them to business concepts. Like I said, leverage on your student. But more importantly, remember what we were talking earlier about being strategic. What is even better than being strategic is being strategically opportunistic. What are the things going on at the moment? What are the issues that are going on right now that your students they are aware of, and you bring them into the conversation to learn. And then their parents are also involved in that. That is strategic opportunistic. It's even better than being strategic sometimes. Okay, so how can we help? We have a number of things we can do, and we work very closely with Benga and CIEC with this. We have a webinar coming up, and we'll be able to send you more information after this session. It's going to be next week, starting on the 7th, I believe, and it's with University of Sussex, but under mastery, and it's going to be delivered by our professors. And it's on inclusive teaching online. And you're going to get the information. But beyond that, you're also going to learn skills on how to use technology-enhanced learning in this current state, in this current age, post-COVID. So that's something we're working on. In terms of people development, that includes your staff and your students. We just launched the student coach. The student coach is, because I'm a trained career coach, I've brought together a range of career coaches in the UK, and we can help you get your students transitions. Remember that transition that you hear a lot about, the student life journey. Transitions when they come to your school, then they have a transition when they go to university, then they have a transition when they get out. But universities and schools don't usually have professional coaches to help with this. And we're putting that forward right now as something that we're doing. So we'll be happy to talk to you about that. But more importantly is the design sprint that we can also do for you, okay? So those are some things that we can do. And those are, I'll share some practical examples on things we've done at Sussex, things that I've seen overseas, and it's in a way challenge you as well to think about what you could do. You have so much in your sphere of influence. And if you look at it from an integrated approach, like Hakan was saying earlier, you can innovate. And I challenge you to innovate and to come and talk to me about how you want to innovate, or ask me if you have questions on some of these ideas, or even if you want to run something similar to what we've done at Sussex, I can help you also do that. And together with Benga, I think we Africans have to empower ourselves to not just follow, but create the solutions, African-made solutions for some of our problems. Remember what I said? Global solutions, but local impact. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Tosin, for that. Every time you share, I learn something new. You're always up to something. Thank you very much. We're just going to open it up now for questions. Tosin said a lot, so just going to open it up for questions before I just bring today's session to a close. Questions, suggestion, inputs, questions.
Benga, sorry, how can I make you host again? See me and my technology. Yeah.
I think you've got to click on my image. Or...
Yep, got it.
Thank you. Great. Well, I know there was a lot in there that that Tosin shared, and I would start by saying that, particularly for the primary schools on this webinar, that strangely, a lot of what Tosin said, primary schools here are already doing it. So it shouldn't be a barrier. So being a primary school should not be a barrier. So there are things that have been shared that you could certainly be a part of. There's a question here that says, okay. What I'm actually going to do, if you don't mind, is there was a question asked about, I think it's how do we appropriate these to primary schools? Great. So the question is still, how do we bring this to primary schools? I would start by saying, and I'm going to allow Tosin come back as well to this as well, is that what was shared is a framework. And like any framework, some things would apply to you right now, something may not apply to you immediately. It may be part of your school's development plan that in the next 2 or 3 years, this is what we want to do. But because of the COVID situation, we're going to start from here right now. So what we've been doing all day, because different schools on this call are in different stages of their journey, is that you can dip in and pick something out regardless of where you are on that journey. So I know some things like might seem quite huge at the moment, but I'm sure we can also scale it down to your level. So for example, Tosin mentioned that we need to look at the student experience as a key part of your recruitment and retention strategy. So the student experience. The answer to that, therefore, is that every school right now, from primary to secondary to sixth form, can be a lot more intentional about the student experience. So we're not just focused on the academic experience, but the overall student experience as a whole. He also mentioned things about having your student ambassadors as well. Once again, these are things that every school can look at this point, regardless of whether it's primary, secondary, sixth form as well. He mentioned communication, and I don't know how this applies to your different schools, but what he said, I actually took it down, is that in some schools you have the academic team, and then you have the team dealing with recruitment and outreach to parents. Maybe, for example, you're a secondary school, you have a feeder primary school, you have a marketing and recruitment team that goes to fairs and exhibition. But to what extent do those two talk? To what extent does your academic team talk to your marketing team, for example? Or is it just that the academics are doing their thing, ensuring they're passing exams, but the marketing and recruitment team are just going out like people who are, you know, like in Nigeria, you have banks opening bank accounts. So they're working like just a company or a team about just getting more people in, but without understanding how the current student experience is. So what he's saying there is that you almost have to bring the two together, the academic team and the sort of recruitment team to be in communication, so that some of the success stories, so for example, your school won a jet competition, a cowbell competition, one thing or the other, how do you feed that into your marketing team's strategy so they can communicate that to families as well? So I think that could apply to schools of all ramifications, primary, secondary, as well. What Helen shared as well, and what I think Tosin mentioned and Akan mentioned, primary schools can team up with primary schools anywhere in the world. And once again, we're happy to help you with that. And already from this September, your school can have an international outlook. These things don't have to take years for it to happen. I think what it would take is the will and the intentionality to make it happen. I'm conscious of the fact that we've gone way beyond our time, but I'm wondering if somebody has one or two burning questions that hasn't been addressed, but you came into today's session weighing on your mind. We're very happy to take that. We don't want these Zoom sessions to just be for talking. So immediately after these sessions, we're actually writing a report on some strategies you can actually follow through. So the last session we had, the video is obviously online, but we've also written an action plan that any school can take and start to adopt. So we're going to do the same thing for this session as well, that by another week or so from today, we'll have the report all together. The different speakers would contribute to that, and that can form some kind of action plan you can start to look at as well. So we don't want this to be a talking shop, so questions and suggestions are always welcome. So does anybody have any burning? Let me see, I'm just checking the attendees. Any questions? Can't see any question at the moment. Okay, well, in the absence of any question, I'm conscious of the fact that we've taken a lot of your time. Thank you very much to all our speakers and contributors today. We really appreciate your time. I'd like to also thank all the delegates. I must say that I always know when the leaders are on the call because they stay till the end regardless of how long it takes. So leaders always stay even though they're busy. They want more, they value their time, but when they have something that would add value to their schools, they stay on for that. So thank you very much for staying beyond the time. I know there are so many other Zoom calls, so many other competing things for your time, but you've taken time out to be with us. So we really value and appreciate you for that. But I'm just going to give you some takeaways before I come and close the session. Tosin mentioned a bias for action and think big, but start small. Let's have a bias for action. Some schools were part of the session 2 weeks ago. What are some of the strategies you've taken forward from that? We've said a lot as well today. What are some of the things you can start? It could be as easy as going on your homepage, on your website, and just put international, more information coming soon. We're planning a summer school, more information coming soon. There needs to be action. We've putting a lot of effort into this because we want schools to take action. That regardless of where you are, there's something you can deep in, and we're still available to help you. So after this session, you can email us and say, well, actually, this is my situation. How can I take it forward? So we're still here to serve you beyond, but let there be a bias for action, and not just of coming to these Zoom calls, but let there be a bias for action. I would also say as well here that in terms of a unique selling proposition, most families we're speaking to in the UK, internationally, would say that now than ever before, the schools that will get their attention must be schools that are focusing on safety and well-being. So that there's been a shift from just examination results. Families are now more concerned about the safety of my child and the well-being of my child going forward. So for a school, it's not that the academics are no longer important, but they must be put in their rightful place. Staying alive is more important than A-star right now. Knowing that your child will be protected will be important. So perhaps in your communication messages to parents, let the safety element be predominant. This is what we're doing about safety of your child. We're even going beyond measures to make sure all is well with your child. So that's got to be a message that every school here can take forward, communicating safety and well-being to families. I think also my final thoughts would be for the school owners and school leaders on this call as well, the importance of investing in training and developing our recruitment and marketing team. I know some schools are doing this very well, but from my own experience of working with schools in Nigeria, in the Middle East, in the UK, sometimes it looks like the recruitment and admission team are just treated as an annex. Those guys on that side, the admission team. But if it's the team that is responsible for bringing in business to your school, then I think that they should actually be part of your strategy development. I think they should actually have a say in some of your leadership meetings as well, because they play an active role. We can't look at them anymore as a distant team. In this age of that every student matters, I think that your recruitment team, your admission team, must also be given a prominence in training, in development, in equipping, and in terms of sharing intelligence with them as well. So that's just like my sort of giveaway as well as we look at this new normal and how we take things forward as well. I'm going to close now because we've certainly taken beyond the time allocated to us. But leave with this message: we are here to serve you. Well, we've been able to gather this experience. I think combined within us, we've got about 60 plus years of experience in different fields that we all bring together. We can serve you. We already know that many more parents want their children to be on the African continent this year. We know that many families who tend to send their children abroad are thinking of keeping them within Nigeria, within Africa this year. How do you position your school to benefit from that? How do you position your school, regardless of its size and its budget, to benefit from online delivery and additional other value services you can offer to your clients? On that note, I just want to thank you all for being with us today. Please encourage your teachers, and you're obviously welcomed as well to join tomorrow's session. Tomorrow's session is once again very practical. We'll be having speakers from the UK, from Ghana, from Botswana, Namibia, China, all sharing experiences of what they're doing in terms of preparing for reopening. Some of them are actually already opened as well. Some of the measures they've taken so far in achieving that. So tomorrow will be very practical. Please encourage your teachers to attend. We look forward to seeing you back as well tomorrow. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Feedback and comments are always valued and appreciated. And we thank you. Thanks to the team as well that have put all this together. Thank you, Tulsi, and all our speakers as well. Enjoy the rest of your day and God bless. Thank you.